Hello and welcome to the Silent Evil Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
I am Cameron.
And we're coming at you with, I have to say this, what might be one of my all-time favorite video game experiences that I've ever had, Parasite Eve on the original PlayStation, good old 1998, a game that is a mixed match of both survival horror and RPG mechanics coming together for just a fantastic experience. And I've technically played through this game, I guess, 4 times by now. And on this last playthrough, it's like I've already really enjoyed this game, but like I can't say enough good things about it. You know, I will say there's a few things of just just the time that you couldn't just recommend it to anybody. I know that for sure. But boy, it's just the story's awesome. I love the character. Aya Brea, I think, is so cool, and just unpacking the story mixed with the gameplay. I just can't wait to talk about it.
Oh yeah. And for me, like, I mean, I've played pieces of it, I guess, and I'm trying to remember where was there. I assume there had to have been a demo of this game or something because I never owned it, but I remember playing Parasite Eve at one point. But I remember like very clearly back then not liking it. Like I didn't, but at the same time, like all of Square's games, all the Final Fantasies, all those types, just was not for me. It just wasn't my type of game. This era like was more, I don't know. I was playing Metal Gear. I was playing Splinter Cell or not Splinter, Siphon Filter, like games like that and whatnot, but yeah, when an RPG came out, at that time, like I don't know, it wasn't for me. But now that I'm older, Jesus, please, where's the clone of this? Like I've actually been looking, I think it's so awesome to mix JRPG with survival horror, like, or at least have like a survival horror tone, and mix those two things together and do it so flawlessly, this game vastly impressed me.
Well, that's the thing is they're literally I think that's why I like it so much is because there isn't anything else out there like it. Even the 2 sequels to Parasite Eve have completely different gameplay styles, and there's nothing wrong with those. Don't get me wrong, I like 2, and I actually like the Third Birthday. I know some other people don't, but I actually enjoy that one. But it's at the same time, what it kind of reminds me of, maybe not. It's actually more extreme than this, but it kind of reminds me of Mass Effect. How Mass Effect 1 had this amazing gameplay style and a very unique style where it's all its own. It was very original. You had the RPG system. You could level up your guns to the point where like they got so good they didn't even have to like recharge anymore and all that stuff. And then when the second one came, it felt like such a step down. And don't get me wrong, I still love Mass Effect 2, but just gameplay wise, I felt like they put reloading in there for some weird reason that wasn't a part of the first one. They took away the RPG mechanics. They stripped everything else down and kind of gave you a more bare bones game. Now, granted, the story's still great. The character, there's still a lot to love about Mass Effect 2, but there's just that little bit where it's like, man, it's like it was. I would have loved to see you just expand on that system that you had in number 1 and refine that. And the same way I even feel with Parasite Eve 2, and it's like Parasite Eve 2, it's still a great game, but it's like I think I would have just enjoyed them just refining this RPG system more than anything and standing out as a unique game instead of doing, I hate to sort of say it, what I always call video games selling out, where you try to be like the other games. Just like Mass Effect 2, I felt like was trying to be more like Gears of War at that time period. I felt like Parasite Eve 2 was trying to lean more like Resident Evil 2 instead of trying to be like Parasite Eve,
Yeah. And in my experience, like, so, because I had Parasite Eve 2 growing up, like I got that. I remember having that game and it just being a worse Resident Evil 2, I guess, and, but at the same time, like I didn't have any context of the first game, so I never went back and played the first game, assuming it was the same thing, but now, like being older and having like remembered some of, like I said, like it had to have been a demo or something in like one of the PlayStation magazines or something, with this game, to now like actually like sitting down and playing it, knowing what PE2 is, and then looking at this game and going like, again, turn-based combat, but with actual movement, like real-time movement, is such a cool concept that I cannot believe does not exist like in like newer games, it's just it's so interesting.
I'll say there's I've never technically played this game, but it's one of those ones that I've looked at ever since it initially came out. But that game, Vagrant Story on PS1, that has that. I think it's made by the dude or the team that did Final Fantasy Tactics, but I think it has the exact same gameplay style as Parasite Eve. That's what I remember reading a little pro review. I was flipping through an old magazine not too long ago, like GamePro or something like that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it plays like Parasite Eve." I was like, "What? Oh, it has the same." I didn't, I mean, if I would have known that, I probably would have actually gravitated towards that one faster. I just thought I was like, "Okay, cool. It's another one of those mini RPGs that I will one day maybe or maybe not get to," But and then, actually a game that plays, I'm not going to say totally like it, but plays in a similar kind of style is Final Fantasy 12. Actually has, because it has that where you can still run around, but then you still stop and you make decisions for your attacks, items, magic, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, but I again, I think just like that alone took me by such surprise, and it just brought so much joy, to like intermix these two things together. Like it was so eloquently done in this game, and I don't know, I can't talk highly enough about its combat model. Like I think it's awesome, and even like and we can get into it a little bit when we actually like hit a section surrounding this, but like your abilities and stuff, your parasite abilities that you have mixed with being able to upgrade weapons, being able to upgrade like armors and the various types of all those things that exist too, and like interchanging parts of weapons and like creating like, I don't know, like it's an actual RPG, like, and it's so good. It's so cool. So like I said, I would love to see this a spiritual successor to this game or something, like if please some indie developer go do that, because like, I think it would be super successful. But
I know, because everybody's always going after Resident Evil, Silent Hill, even Alone in the Dark and all kinds of stuff, even Dino Crisis, but you don't see anybody touching the Parasite Eve style yet, at least not so far.
Yep.
But it's one of those ones I feel like it still fits in. It fits in that core era of like the golden age of survival horrors, where you of course you have Resident Evil and Alone in the Dark, but you also have Silent Hill, Dino Crisis, Fatal Frame, and Parasite Eve. All coming together here, and just everything about this. I think one thing that's cool about it too is the storyline. I remember the first time I ever played it, I was like, "Oh, dude, it is literally like it's like Die Hard, but with like Japanese like mutation elements and so on." Because it's literally the story is like, "Oh, you're in New York City, you know what I mean? You're a police officer, and it's even got these like lethal weapon kind of elements too. It takes place on Christmas.
Yeah,
there's so much of that stuff there."
Yep.
You got your partner who always just kind of reminds you of like a mix of Danny Glover and then Barrett from Final Fantasy VII.
100%. Yep, I can see that. Yep.
So I just think that's such a just like one of those. I feel like I'm playing like a Die Hard spinoff that has this fantasy element going on with it.
Yep. Yeah, and in such a interesting intro too, just like you essentially just like pull up in that limousine with your boyfriend or whatever, and like you're like walking into this theater for an opera, and then just like out of nowhere just hell breaks loose, like you have this woman just starts like up on stage starts singing, and then people just start bursting into flames and melting, and like to not fully understand what Parasite Eve is narratively, because there is other mediums for this, from what I understand, between books and movies, and there's video games, not knowing any of that, walking into that and seeing that scene, because again, my only context for anything Parasite Eve is PE2, so in that game confused me as a kid because I had no context for the movie or the book or PE1 at that point. But again, like I just think it's was such a cool intro to come in and be that drastic, that quick and whatnot, because Aya just like immediately is just like, oh, there's a problem, and then it just pushes that story forward. One quick comment that I'll say about story wise, like in general, the flow of this storyline is so well done between all 5 or 6 of its acts, however many acts it has, or days, I guess, 6 days, I guess. but it continually just pushed me along the whole way, and I never felt like I was, I don't know, rushed through anything, per se. It was, I don't know, it was very well paced. I'll say that. So,
well, it's one of those ones when you think about the initial cut scene starts off, and it's the cameras coming down over the Statue of Liberty in New York. You can see the Twin Towers in the background, and everything, but the Statue of Liberty's literally got blood coming down from the eyes for some weird reason. It's like just one of those ones, just be like, huh, something's going on here. And then it hard cuts with like Christmas banners and all kinds of stuff, and you have this intermix as you like flow into this opera scene and whatnot. And I think story-wise, I think because it's Squaresoft, and this is Square, like at their like time period where like their stories are all fantastic, right here. I mean, you just had Chrono Trigger. You got Final Fantasy 7, 8's coming up next, and so on like that. So there's just so much good stuff going on. And I think kind of the interesting thing is when I look at this game too, is it has that mixture feeling like it was I feel like it was kind of made to be somewhat of a test run for Final Fantasy 8 because the graphics have an in-between look of 7 and 8 to them. Yep. Like they still carry over. It doesn't look at, and 8's, I think, still the next year. So this game's like totally in between 7 and 8 anyways, but just that look of it just looks like they were testing out that like the engine that would eventually become Final Fantasy 8's.
So I overheard in probably a video that I watched or something that the Final Fantasy developers were actually using this game as a core concept for FF7 at one point, and then decided to shelve the storyline of it. It wasn't supposed to be Parasite Eve to begin with. It was supposed to be like Cloud and Barrett and all these, like different people like in New York or whatever, with more of like a detective theme to it or whatever. Decided that was a bad idea, probably for the best, because now we have the beautiful game Final Fantasy 7 and this, so they mixed this into the Parasite Eve universe through the book and movie, I guess, by this. Did the movie come out before or after this? Like that's
okay. Fun. So the movie came out, so the book's 1995. I've still yet to read the book. I've always kind of want to sit down and read it. But I did sit down and watch the movie because that's another one I've always wanted to see. And I heard that the movie was generally pretty accurate to the book, probably not nearly as effective in effects and whatnot. I think the book's a little bit more graphic, of course. It's a book.
Sure.
But so what it really is the movie / book is technically the prequel to this game right here. And pretty much any of those scenes that Maeda tells later on where he talks about, back in Japan, this happened and this happened, that all came straight from the movie. And then it shares some of the same soundtrack, actually, too. Some of the sound cues are similar in the movie as they are in the game. Yeah, which I thought was kind of neat. It's kind of a weird one because it's like one of those ones like you don't think of that too much. Like, we're going to take we got this book here. Let's turn this book that kind of reads like a Michael Crichton like science one. We'll turn that into this like RPG video game in a sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes more sense then. I overheard that it was the like you just said, the movie and the book were prequels to this, but. Man, I forgot what path I was going down with all that. Anyways, Carnegie Hall, being a place in New York, too, especially with all these locations that we go to in this game, but to start off in Carnegie Hall, like I said, Opera House, as you were alluding to, like Statue of Liberty, like bleeding out of its eyes and all that, and then we go into this theater essentially, and like seeing all those characters like do their play and whatnot, and then everybody just burst into chaos, and like I said, just like seeing people just straight up light up into flames and whatnot, and melt into the floor into like these like large puddles of goop and whatnot. Like it's actually for its time too, like the way that they animated everything, like in that style, which I can imagine at the time was like super. I don't know if it was scary or not. That's kind of like I asked you that question at one point of, where is the horror and the survival horror of this, like, and that's me viewing it in 2025, but back then, like, I would be really curious to like see what the thoughts were, of like people back then, if this actually was like a scary game or if it was themed scary,
and the way I look at it is because there's probably all of like maybe 2 jump scares kind of in this game, and one of them's where like a couple monsters jump through a window, that's about the closest thing that they got to it.
Yeah.
And beyond that, though, I think it's more like it's a game that's more horror themed. I think it's not looking to be straight get you with the jump scares or anything like that. It's supposed to be just more like, check out how creepy it is in New York right now. Like, imagine this. People are literally lighting on fire, melting away. They're turning into this giant mitochondria creature thing like that, like body horror type stuff. And I think it's going for a different type of vibe. Like, it's supposed to be more that kind of creepy. Like, if you sit there and think about it and you put yourself in that situation, you're like, shit, that would be terrible to be in. Like, you know, what's worse, Raccoon City or being stuck in New York during this time period? You know what I mean? And I think that's sort of, I think even Square kind of knew. Because, well, I think the thing is, because you have RPG gameplay mechanics, the only thing that gets scary in RPG mechanics is when you get to that point where you're about to die and you realize it's been a long time since you saved. That is the scary part of an RPG. You're like, no, don't do that stupid attack.
Please.
You know, so beyond that, I mean, because you have RPG mechanics, and you know, it's not like Resident Evil or Silent Hill where you're like, oh, I guess I should probably run away from this creature instead. You're like, no, I want to kill everything in its path because they have experience points. So that kind of changes the flow of it, where it's more like you are the predator, not them.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. No, and like you said, I definitely had plenty of those moments where, oh my God. So I guess that's something else that we should explain too, is like, so I'm playing on original, I'm playing on a PS2, but I'm playing on an original disc, PS1 version. And you said that you were doing some form of emulation of it?
Well, that was the thing. I remember because when we talked about doing this podcast and just playing Parasite Eve again, and, you know, we talked about this 6+ months ago or something like that. And I kind of told you, I'm like, you know, if I were you, I'd probably play this game on emulation. And it's like, and the main reason I say that is because it's weird. The biggest problem is that it has random encounters in there. And unlike every other game that mostly people complain about the random encounters being too frequent, this game is the exact opposite, where they're very infrequent. Because I remember when I first played this game, because I never played this game technically on original hardware. I think it was in like the 2000s, and I remember I had my laptop, and I was like, it was like right when the PlayStation emulator started finally working decently, you know? And I was like, oh, I'm going to play through Parasite Eve. I've always wanted to play this. And I remember playing on there, and I was like, why? Okay, there was a battle of like, okay, so there's random encounters, but then I was like, boy, why am I not triggering it? And so I'm running back, forth, circling around, trying. And then I was like, oh, they got a speed up feature on here. Let me try that. And I kept going back, forth. And I'm like, oh, they just take a long time to trigger these random battles for some reason. That's the only thing that's kind of a strange feature in the game that I will say is why I think this game kind of is. I will say I think it's kind of better to play on emulator just for that alone. It's not saying that it's not impossible, because it's not the world's longest game at least, but you do kind of have to battle with that if you don't, because you played it on original hardware, and there was a period where I was kind of afraid that like he might get halfway into this and then not want to continue farther. That was my fear, is that you're going to get to a point where you're like, dude, I don't know if I can take because the load times comparatively to other things on PlayStation 1, they're not too bad, but it is a little. And the game plays a fraction slower, I guess you would say, than maybe other things and so on like that. As I said, if it wasn't for I'll say this, if it wasn't for technically the low encounter rates, I feel like you could get by playing this game on its normal speed, a little bit extra load times and so on. But,
I felt like I still got it done pretty proficiently, pretty much right in the realm of like how long it took you to finish too. What I figured out though is, and there's exceptions to this, but for the most part, in smaller rooms where camera angle changes, you walk through a door or whatever, when that occurs and you're in like a smaller room, what I noticed is, and again, this is just my wireframe brain thinking, like as I'm playing this game, there's very certain trigger points in each room that causes a random encounter. More often than not, in a smaller room, there's one encounter in that room. You have to physically leave and come back. There's exceptions to that I've noticed, where I think if you it's either, it has to be timed, I guess, because it's not like random points on the map of like the screen that you're looking at. It's very a straight line that I noticed, because like I would go into a room and like say there's 100 pixels, and on pixel 40, I cross the room on pixel 40 or whatever. I trigger an event when I hit 40 and like say like line 60, like this in that x-axis right there. same thing. If I go up to like line 20, a little higher up or whatever, but still on that same line, left to right, like I'm still triggering it, up there too. So I think it's either vertical or horizontal lines somewhere in each zone, like has a trigger point for an event. And the other way that I know this is because if you go into an encounter and you try to escape, when you escape, you exit on the side of the room that you entered from. It won't put you on the other side of the room. And if you attempt to walk, like I'm explaining this poorly, more or less, like if you escape an event, you're going to exit the battle on the side of the room that you entered in from. So whatever door that is. If you don't leave, after exiting battle, if you don't leave that room and you try to walk the opposite direction to go out the other doors, so say if there's 2 doors in the room, if you try to walk the opposite way, you're going to trigger that event again. And it happens every time. So you can escape. It's going to throw you back into the side of the room that you entered on. You try to walk back across the room without ever exiting that room, and it's going to trigger again at that same exact point every time. So there is a way to game it. And I started to get really good at it. And I think that's how I started to level so quickly, is because I was gaming rooms just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So early on, I was texting you and I was telling you, I was just like, man, like some of these load times, some of the, like, because when you stack like a 3 to 5 second animation every time, Aya goes into battle, because like it just throws like a heartbeat sound, everything goes black and white, and then the battle starts, and it's like 3 to 5 seconds every single time. That over the course of a 10-hour game, adds a lot of time, do that and whatnot. But again, when I'm able to gamify it, figuring out the wireframe side of it, just entering and exiting rooms and going over certain trigger points over and over again, I was able to gamify it and like really level quickly. So I don't feel that emulation very likely is the best way to play at this point, for sure. But if you do have it on physical hardware, that's basically how you get around that, more or less. So that's what I figured out about it.
Yeah, cool. Because I was the whole time, because I'm even questioning it myself too. And I'm just even say this on the load times real quick before I continue with the other thought is, realistically, the load times are probably no different than 7 or 8 for Final Fantasy. They're probably about, and since those are actually probably take a little bit longer to get in the battle, to tell you the truth. Yeah. Because they always have to do that rotation, dun 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 dun. You're spinning around. Yeah. Where this one at least kind of goes right into it, kind of like Chrono Trigger. Yeah. But what I kind of learned is that there was also some stuff that I found that apparently in, I think, a Japanese guide or something like that, it talked about the encounter rate percentages. So the first time you hit a room, it has 100% encounter rate, so that you hit that. Because I think the game's almost designed that you're supposed to you're not supposed to sit there and train like you do in Final Fantasy or anything else. It's kind of meant to be like you're supposed to generally level up just by going back and forth. So the first one gives you 100%. You're going to trigger that battle, whatever. Once you defeat that enemy and you come back again, I think it's like a 40% chance that it might happen. So you could go through the room twice and maybe not see anything, but maybe the third time it triggers it again. Then it drops down to a 10%. So that's why it makes it kind of tough to like go back, forth, because now you're just working on 10%. Now, granted, once you turn up the speed and you're running through rooms, the 10% is not so bad, but sometimes I could go back and forth 10 times through rooms and finally it'll trigger a battle. And then, as you were saying, when you run away from the battle, what happens when you run away from the battle? It turns it back to 100% again,
Okay.
And once in a blue moon, I will say there's a couple times where like I did run away from a battle just to get out of a certain area, that if you run away enough, you'll have there'll be like one chance that you'll be able to run across the room and it won't trigger it.
Interesting. See, like I said, like I was kind of cutting it up into like, basically vertical and horizontal lines every screen that I was seeing. But like, I swear, like there was just like certain trigger points that I would walk over and like it would guarantee like a hit every time. So anyways, it's just interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I said, because the whole time I was trying to figure it out properly, exactly how it kind of goes. And yeah, I still felt like, other than like those percentages and so on, that made kind of sense, because it's like, yeah, they do sort of dwindle. It's kind of like, when you first enter an area, you hit battle, but then when you start going back through, it gets less, and then it gets less and less and less. As I said, I don't think the game was initially designed for you to sit there and just train for like an hour at a crack, like it's Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest.
Well, and I think that's apparent too, because of the way that every single level and the increase in XP that you need for the next level, which is very common in a lot of games, but like there comes a certain point, because when I was grinding certain zones, yeah, absolutely, it's just the XP just wasn't worth it at that point. It wasn't worth the time sink, to put that in. So it's like, okay, now it's time to progress. However, I never really felt, outside of maybe chapter 4 or 5, towards the end of the game, I really never felt the need to grind. Like, I feel like the encounter rate of walking room to room to room on a mainline path towards your main objective was enough for the first 3 chapters, maybe even the 4th chapter, to really just play the game. I mean, like, I didn't have to sit there and grind over and over and over again. So again, it kind of plays into like the story pacing and whatnot. I feel like its leveling pacing and everything is like very well tuned up until the very end of or more or less like towards the end of the game. Then there's like massive difficulty spikes for sure. But yeah, up until that point, I never really like had to train. I was just playing the game. I was, and I think that's like where you commented on, like you were worried about me getting about midway through the game and going like, I don't know if I want to finish this. Really, I think it's because it succeeded so well at its pacing that it kept me going, whether it be, oh, I'm going to get a little more powerful with this next level, or is it like, oh, what's going to happen to Aya next, in the story and whatnot. It was those 2 driving factors that were just alternating back and forth that just kept me going, more or less. So
yeah, well, see, and that's good to hear, because as I said, I was kind of uncertain, since my experiences were generally always playing this on emulation, and just being able to have that extra feature because I just thought, because I was like, wow, how long is this game going to take if you don't have that little bit of a speed up factor to kind of help you out there and so on. And as I said, it sounds like you went through it kind of fine, where like, I mean, I did, like, because I could, like, I did train, like, I mean, right in the very beginning, it's like, oh, the first couple times you see battles, like, oh, I got myself to level 7. And then you get to the next section, I got myself to level 14. And, it's just like, once it felt like, okay, I think I've kind of maxed these enemies out for a bit, then I'll go on. But that's the thing I will say, is going into even the leveling up system, is it has a very cool way of like multiple different things. Like, not only do you get your standard levels that give you points and so on, but or stats and so on, but then you also get these things called battle points that I didn't even realize you could do actually more of it till you brought it up. You're like, because I was like, I saw the thing is like, okay, I could put my battle points can go into my inventory, or they can go into my active time bar. And so I just put everything generally. I put a little bit into inventory and then put the rest in my active time bar. I didn't even question that, because the way that the menu looks, it just looked like it was just showing me my armor and my guns right below. So I was like, okay, whatever. And then it's like, you're like, dude, you can put actually you can increase your like stats on like your guns and armor and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, dude, this is the 3rd time I played this game. I never even noticed that I could do that.
So up until that point, I was the polar opposite. I knew that you could do BP into, weapons and armor. I had no idea you could put it into your time bar, because like, I remember like complaining to you at one point. I'm like in chapter 3 and I'm just like, dude, it takes forever for me to do actions, man. Like, what is going, and enemies are just getting harder and harder, so, but even at that point, I was still able to like revert. I didn't even have to revert a save or anything. I was just able to just like, oh, now that I know that, now all the battle points that I get are going to go towards my time bar and whatnot, So again, it's pacing, it's flow. It's so well designed. Like, I can't believe that this game isn't like more of a talking point in this genre, so.
Well, I'll even say this, the cool thing about the battle points too is as the game goes on and the more you level up, unlike other games where it's like, oh, I'm getting farther up in levels, like you start getting less and less stuff. It's like, no, it actually gives you way more battle points. So like when the first, let's say like 7 levels, you can put pretty much like 1 point on everything in a sense, maybe 2 points. By the time you reach level 10, now you can put like 3 points on everything. By the time you're in level 20, it's like 5 or 6 points. By the time you're like level 30, it's like you can literally put like 10 points on everything by that point, which is like each time you get a level. So it's like, oh, so like even if you kind of did mess up and you're like, oh, well, you can't really mess up. You just put stuff on things you probably weren't too sure, later on, it's like, oh, I can exchange, or I can just fill up the other one quite fast, just a couple levels. Next thing you know, it's caught up. So that's what's really neat there. And then I was going to say the third kind of leveling up that they have is the guns and armor and how all their stats are. The only thing you just got to make sure is you just got to figure out that initial, like when you have the tools, what not to erase, because that part's the initial try to figure it out. It's a little bit confusing. Like, well, which one's which? Like, you don't click on the one that's technically the gun you want the points to go to. You click on the opposite gun, and then it shuffles the points over, or it shuffles the perks and stats.
Right.
But it's kind of a cool thing that you can kind of cannibalize your armor and guns at the police station, and take your stats that you've built up on one, slap it onto a new gun, try that out, and go from there.
Yep. So, this is also why I would love to do the EX run, the New Game Plus run. I didn't engage with any of that. My leveling of weapons were through BP points. I knew that you could, because it throws you into that tutorial early on, within the first chapter or whatever, where it teaches you about how you can change things out and use tools and this, that, and the other. I just never. Do you still need those like little ticket things or whatever to give to the guy so he can take your weapon over, like, and modify it?
Okay, so what the tickets do is all they do, and then later they turn into trading cards for the second guy, is they just give you an expanded roster of how many perks you can put on your gun. So that's what the tickets do.
Okay.
So that they expand how many perks you can have on your guns. Or armor. You can do it for armor too. And then, so the tools, what they do is they take the stats from, let's just say guns. So you got your attack, your critical hit, or whatever,
right.
Or I guess your attack, your range, and your bullets. And then you could take whatever's on one gun, slap it on the other. If you have a regular tool, it kills the gun. So whatever gun you did gets destroyed, so it can get converted over. Or if you didn't do that, the stats, you could take a perk from it. So if it had like, it has triple shot. Oh, it has, explosive ammo, any of that kind of stuff, you could swap it over. And then when you find the super tools, which there's like maybe 2 of them in the standard game, I noticed, the super tool will actually preserve the weapon and just take the stats and move it over, but it doesn't delete it. Yeah. So it's kind of nice when you have a gun that's really like well equipped, but then you get a gun that's even better, and you're like, well, I want to take both my stats and my perks over, but then you need the super tool for it. Yeah. Realistically, you don't get more super tools until you go to the Chrysler Building. So it's kind of a there's a whole second like. The Chrysler Building actually offers quite a bit when it comes to that upgrading. Yeah, you saw that picture I showed you. Yeah. I got that AK-47 to like 450 damage or something stupid.
This is crazy. See, but this I think this is also a testament to how well this game is paced and designed. Because I didn't upgrade anything outside of BP to just straight up just damage, which I didn't even do all that much. You can 100% beat this game with just basic ass guns. Like you don't need to go crazy, like with all that. It's cool that you can. I love seeing, like you said, like when you got through your Chrysler Building thing and you sent me that last screenshot of like your weapon build, I was like, holy, like you can do that in this game? Like, damn, But I got away with beating the game with the M79B whatever, grenade launcher at 60 damage.
Yeah.
It took a long time, I'll tell you that. Like it takes forever to kill things. But no, you can totally do it. And I think that kind of like combat and all that leading into your parasite abilities and whatnot, which is a whole other layer on top of all these other things that we've been talking about. Then all of a sudden you have parasite abilities that more or less like work off of like a magic bar. Essentially, it's essentially magic. Like at least in terms of like JRPG. But I think they're awesome, and again, well designed, well paced. You get things pretty drip fed to you as you're leveling pretty well. There's a handful in there of abilities that I was just like, I'm never going to use that, but I think they're great. I think they're awesome.
Well, yeah, because I'll say that then getting into that next layer of the gameplay and so on like that, and that's why I feel this game has so much gameplay to pack, and then to top it off, it has a grand story too. But you get into the magic / item section, and I'll really say this for like the first half of the game, I even wrote this down. It's like I noticed I almost never used items for a long time in this game. It's like they were unnecessary because my magic bar would always, go back up, and I'd be like, well, I'll just use heal, 1, 2, or 3 depending on where I'm at in the game. I really don't need these items. It wasn't really till like the game gets either harder on EX mode or slash the Chrysler building, and then where I had I had an auto heal perk on one of my armors, so it just automatically Aya would just use a potion if my health went down too low. Beyond that, though, I felt like you could almost get by if the game didn't have items in it. You could almost probably get by without it. Like the items are almost more like a bonus if you want to use them. They're there, but you could almost say you could just use magic and just use heal and so on. And I know you were saying that like you didn't use a whole lot of the magic stuff because that's how I kind of feel too. Is I feel out of like, let's say there's 15 magic spells. I don't know if that's exactly it. I felt like there's probably 5 of them I realistically use, maybe 6 or so.
I used heals and then the big dick damage ability, whatever the fuck.
The liberation.
Yeah, the liberation.
It's like Knights of the Round practically. Aya comes in with 7 massive attacks. It's funny because that attack is so good throughout the game, but when I got towards the end of the Chrysler building, that was one of those ones like it's not that it wasn't still good, but I had to use actually other magic by that point because I needed barrier to protect me and I needed haste to run around because I noticed that was sometimes the only way that Aya could dodge stuff is by doing or by throwing haste on.
Yeah. Haste is great.
Because you got to have haste. The only downfall is it just doesn't last very long. You throw it on and you pretty much get like 2 dodges out of it and then you got to do it again.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, I used haste a ton, and again, it's probably because of the way that I played because I wasn't upgrading weapons. So like majority of enemies in this game with that grenade launcher took 4 shots. I would usually do somewhere between 40 to 60-ish, 70-ish damage, depending on crits and whatnot. But pretty consistently, and I'm just assuming that majority of the enemies in this game have 200 health or 220 or 250-ish, somewhere around that range. Because again, majority of enemies would take 4 shots with this thing. So mixing that alongside my heals and my slow time bar because I wasn't upgrading that, I personally was using items like crazy because I couldn't upgrade my my PE bar. I couldn't, like my active time bar. I wasn't able to like attack so often. So I was getting hit constantly. Which is where I was at the very start of the game. I was like taking all my BP and dumping it into my armor so I could tank shit, basically. So I kind of had this like unique gameplay where I was like very tanky with really like bad damage weapons and whatnot, and not having a ton of regain of ATB or PE, and so again, like I was tanking stuff often. So when haste finally came around, when I leveled up high enough to get haste was huge for me because I could actually move, like quickly and get around and dodge and whatnot, So I think, yeah, I mean, like probably right off the bat right there. I mean, like you and I probably had vastly different, combat experiences anyways,
Yeah, it kind of sounds like it too. And I kind of learned a lot with a lot of battles. It's like sometimes you feel like, oh, I should try to run around. So it's like sometimes you're better off just being like, no, just stand there, take the damage, and then do as much damage as you possibly can, because most likely you'll end up killing them in time, and then you can just heal post, battle, because a lot of times it's that thing. It happens in a lot of video games where you feel like, oh, if I'm gonna dodge, and then you realize you're like that actually probably made it worse. Yep. I got way less damage in. I still ended up getting hit, and if I would have just stood there and just took it and just kept firing, I would have killed it. Yep. I learned that in many of those battles. Sometimes it's just the best thing to do is just keep firing. Just keep firing.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Don't stop attacking.
Yep.
Heal when necessary, but keep firing.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and that's most of my like just like RPG experience in general. Throughout a lot of different games is just out. All you have to do is out damage the thing that's attacking you, like, and as long as you can out damage it before it kills you, it's like more often than not you're fine, and a lot of my fights turned into that in this game and whatnot. So yeah, I totally feel that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's the thing about this game is it does have this wide variety of all these different kind of things you can kind of control, manipulate, and change around and kind of use whatever you strikes your fancy and so on like that. And the fact that it's also like, in a sense, a single character RPG, which you almost never see. You know, that's pretty rare. Like Dragon Quest One is one like the only other ones I can think of, you know, around this time and so on. I mean, of course, there's action RPGs are single player, but like or single character, but you know, not generally like ones that are still in a turn-based you know, frame. But it works out well. There's so many different ways you can kind of go about it. But you want to sort of dive into the story next and kind of lead our way through that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, lead us off.
So yeah, so okay, we're at the opera. That's where we kind of left off at before we got so excited about the gameplay, you know, all that stuff. Well, because it's really what you once you kind of have that opera scene, everybody lights on fire, and for some reason, Aya is the only one who can like withstand this, you know, and she goes to investigate and whatnot. And if you want, you can actually run back to those police officers, and they'll give you like a crap ton of ammo right off the bat. Like that dude will give you like 15 clips, it seems like, and he's like, oh, I'm finally out. You took everything from me, Aya. You know, but you go to investigate. You know, there's that actress and whatnot, and who's changed her name. I can't remember. I think her original name is it Melissa? Is that what it was?
I think, yeah, Melissa Pierce.
Yeah, Melissa Pierce, and then of course she's, you know, infected by Eve, and that's kind of where that comes into. But you don't really know all this yet. You're just tracking her down. You're going deeper into like the back of the stage and everything like that, and down these holes and so on. And this is where you learn that like, oh, I can start, you know, fighting enemies and leveling up and training. Here's some mutated rats and all kinds of crazy creatures I'm coming against, you know. But
and to touch on that just real brief, because that cutscene, dude, when you come across the rat and the rat starts to like split apart and its skin starts stretching and its bones break and like get all big and stuff. Again, like of that era, like I can imagine that was like horrifying to see, you know, like at that time, you know. I don't know. Again, why does this not have a spiritual successor at this point? Because like this it needs it. Anyways, continue. But that cutscene in particular was super cool. Yeah,
well, that's the thing. The monsters are badass. They literally rival anything that like Silent Hill or Resident Evil does, if not doing some things better in a sense. You know. And yeah, as I said, you track down and you finally find that, you know, Melissa, this actress, has been kind of possessed by Eve. She's been in this like experiment. You find one diary entry. I almost want to say it's like the only diary entry in this entire game. And you find her and just she's talking about she's taking a bunch of drugs and everything like that and getting all hopped up and she can't get rid of them and so on. And this experiment's going great, you know. And of course, in the process, she's been able to control her mitochondria. We'll learn more about this later, but it's making it so that she can control it, which makes it, you know, she can control the thermal part of that, which is how she kind of made all these people light on fire. And secretly we learn that Aya has a similar mitochondria, and that's why she's able to withstand it while nobody else can. And from there, Eve escapes out, of course. You know, you think you're going to get her here. You have this kind of cool battle by like the piano and whatnot, and she breaks out. And then you come back and you find, in a sense, the rest of your police officer teams and so on. You got Officers Daniels, who's kind of like, as I said, the mixed match of like Barrett from Final Fantasy VII and Danny Glover from Lethal Weapon. Like that's what they really reminds me of a lot. You know, like he's almost like 2 steps to retirement and everything like that. I'm getting too old for this shit, Aya.
Yeah, basically.
As I said, it's literally Japanese Die Hard.
This
is the best way to describe this.
That's awesome.
But it's cool because then you go back and you got the police station, you got this home center, you meet all these cool characters in there and whatnot. And it feels like it's like a cop drama thriller, you know, mystery kind of thing going on. And, you know, you talk to the police chief and you talk to some of the other police officers. You could check out this whole kind of police office and see just all like the elements to it. It's just got a really cool world building. And then, of course, you're in New York. So you travel to all these real life locations that are getting kind of effective and have problems. Like the next area you go after you've been to the police station is you get to go to Grand Central Park, you know, and you have to go. They're like, oh, there was another show going on. It wasn't an opera. It was, what the heck was? You get there. It was like a concert or something like that. And I remember because like,
oh yeah. Because it's your partner's son is there with the mom.
Yeah, because then there's been and like his you know, he's like Daniel is divorced or whatnot, but like, you know, his wife's gone to this concert, and it's like, oh, well, you can't go to the concert. Like, you know, that's where Eve's going to be at next. And he's like, well, shit, we got to get over there. Let's jump in the car and get there and whatnot. And, of course, Daniel realizes that he can't go inside the area or he'll catch on fire. So you have to send just Aya. And you go into this area discovering that everybody, I think this is the part where you see everybody gets melted this time. So the first time everybody's burnt. This time she's literally melted everybody into goo, and they've kind of absorbed into this. Well, they absorbed into the sewers first and so on. You don't really know where it's going, but she just kills everybody here, including your partner Daniel's wife and so on. Yep. And you're in Grand Central Park or whatever Central Park. There's a zoo there. You're battling all kinds of animals that are now getting infected by this virus that Eve is and so on. And it's a cool location. And like what's neat is just these places just keep changing up over and over.
Yeah, no. Yeah, like you were saying, from Carnegie Hall over to the precinct, now over into Central Park, like already, I mean, like it very much, I don't know. I've been to New York in terms of like I've been to the airport, like I've flown over New York. I've looked at maps. I've seen pictures of it. Never actually been there, but
I played Grand Theft Auto 3.
Yeah, exactly. There's Chinatown, which is another place we go to. But no, I mean, just like to see all these like real life, locations, I guess, like how accurate they are to real life, who knows? But the fact that they exist is pretty cool. In Central Park for me too is like, especially once you get into the zoo and you start seeing the crazy amalgamation of the various amounts of mobs and monsters in this game is wild, dude. Like I was so impressed with the amount of creatures there are in this game, because it's not just your typical zombie you run across, over and over again. There's repeats of mobs, like as you're doing your random battling and whatnot, of course. But it's like in one battle you may run into like one fly monster that's like literally like a fly that like pukes on you and gives you poison or whatever. The next fight might be like some little blob on the ground that like throws like fire bombs at you or whatever and lights you on fire or whatever. And then you go into like your next battle and then it's like it's now two flies in one of those blobs, or it's like a mixture of blah blah blah. But again, like the amount of design that there is for monsters in this game was fantastic, and I'm going to continually talk about it as we go through each section. But here in particular, all the monsters of like animals that transform due to this virus thing was super cool. I thought it was awesome.
Well, yeah, because at first you start off and there's some like snakes, and then there's ravens and so on like that, and then there's like weird mutated monkey things. And you just keep kind of coming across a lot of these different ones here and so on like that. And yeah, the enemies things are kind of neat. This also is this. There's another part that pops up here that I didn't know what this was for a long time. But there's the enemies, like the crows, for example, drop things called junk. And at first, I thought what the junk was, as I was like, oh, maybe they just don't want you just jamming the X button like at the end of battle just to keep going on. They're like, no, they want you to stop and go, oh no, I'll take the ammo, I'll take the health, and so on like that. Because I never really knew what the junk was for a long time. Yep. Did you ever figure out what the junk was?
No. Nope.
I eventually, yeah, you can turn into the dude. I eventually just looked it up because I was curious. And so what happens is you collect 300 pieces of junk. You can take it to the second dude at the police station at the weapons department, and he will custom make you a gun. And he gives you a list where it says like rocket launcher, machine gun, pistol, shotgun, yada, yada, yada. And then he has one at the very bottom that says custom choice, or it says let Wayne make a custom one. And I did the thing where I'm like, I want to see what that is, but first I'm going to look up what he gives you so I can know what I'm picking, and I'm going to save right beforehand.
Yeah.
And so I looked up and I was like, well, that AK-47 looked pretty good. And I had to do it like 7 times, and he finally gave me something, because a lot of times he'll mess up, and then like that 300 points of junk that probably would have, if on a normal game would have taken you like 3 hours to get, goes away. So it's because what I had to do is I had to go back later in the game to that Central Park area and just harvest stuff from those birds over and over and over again, and then drag back about 35 pieces of junk at a time to Wayne. So I had to make that trip like 7-8 times to do it.
Gotcha.
But that's what gave me that AK-47 that happened to be the gun I kept the whole time in the game. And I really had to retry about 7 times for Wayne to get it right.
Really interesting. Okay, yeah.
Because I just never knew what that stuff was. I used to think, I thought it was just they just didn't want you to keep pressing X like a madman.
Yeah, no, what I thought it literally was like it's literally just junk just filling up your inventory, to play more into the survival horror aspect of inventory management. Like I just assumed that's what it was, because I gave the dude some junk, but nothing happened. He was just like, "Oh, I'll take that off your hands," and then my inventory emptied of it, and I'm like, okay.
Very vague about it. Yeah, it doesn't say anything more.
So very consistently what I was doing is I would come across a container, and so inventory management is a whole other piece of this too that you have to maintain. But very consistently, because I wasn't upgrading my storage at all, I was running out of space, So very consistently, like I would go up to a box, or like a chest or whatever in the world, would open it, and like it'll say your inventory is full. Would you like to trade something? And it's like, yeah, throw the junk in there, and then like I get my medicine or whatever, So yeah.
At least the nice thing I will say about the inventory management in this game, though, is even though you do run across that a lot where you got to stop and like either clear things out or whatnot, at least the thing is you can do that. You can stop. You could just toss things out if you don't want it. You can just use, you know what I mean? You never get to that point where you're just like, oh, let me go run back to an item box now. Oh, geez. At least, and the fact is that like, even if you don't really like regularly upgrade it, like just as time goes on, like every level adds like one more point anyways to your inventory thing, so it slowly grows. So at the end of the day, you're mostly doing pretty good. The worst case you come across is like, man, I can't hold those extra 5 potions. Well, that kind of sucks.
Yep. No, it was like getting to the point of like, okay, I need to trade out the med 2 so I can hold the med 3.
That's mostly what happens. You just start throwing them on the ground like, I don't need this, don't need that. I mean, I got better ones now. So at least the inventory management's kind of nice there. One other one I actually wanted to say, I wrote this down in my notes, but did you ever use the club?
No.
Yeah, because it's weird because they give you a club in the game for Aya's pretty much melee weapon, and I know it's there, I guess, if somebody just messes up and just blows all their ammo, at least they still have a weapon they can use. The weird thing about it, though, is I feel like this game has an abundance of ammo that I feel like you have to mess up to make yourself. You have to throw the ammo on the ground practically to not have ammo.
You could probably by the time you're at where we're talking about in day 2, when you're at Central Park, like this was the only point of the game where, but I never ran out, but it would get tight, like I would get down to like maybe 20, 30 rounds, something like that. And it's like, how am I going to do the next fight? But literally just, there are chests everywhere. There's interactable things everywhere. There's lockers and drawers and, just like things to do, like, so as long as you're like walking around tapping X on things, you're going to pick up more ammo. I never felt the need for a melee weapon in that game, like whatsoever.
No, in worst case, you could always go back to the police station and you open that one box there, and there's like 30 rounds in that. So at least it kind of gets you back in business, And I'll say in the Central Park, you kill the snakes. I think like each snake always gives you 6 rounds.
Yeah.
So It's like they're always giving you a ton. I'll say this. I actually ironically never used the club till way late in the game when I was trying to get the junk from those crows. And the only reason I started using it because I was like, well, wait a second, because when you kill the crows, they don't give you any ammo. And I was like, I had a club like 3 or whatever by this point, like an upgraded club, and it had a steal function on it, or it had mugs. So I went there. So every time you club a crow, it would give you an extra thing of junk for the most part, and then you would get the junk when you beat them too, so you got practically double from it. So I started using the club for that, and so it did have a purpose. But granted, I guess you could probably I don't know, you might be able to take that ability and pull it from the club, but I almost want to say the club is not considered the same thing as the guns. Yeah, like, I don't know, because I tried to put stats on the club once, and it was like you couldn't do that. But you can combine club to club, so they're kind of in like their own, like, if there's armor, then there's guns, then there's the club.
Yeah.
But I still thought the club was kind of a strange one. It reminds me of like one of those ones where you would think it would almost be like integrated with your guns you use. So like, say like an enemy gets really close to you, you think Aya would, if you pretty much attacked an enemy when they're point blank range, she would club them instead of like shoot them, and it would just be integrated together. Like, so if they're far away, she'll shoot, but if you run up real close, you can club them, and maybe the club actually does pretty good damage, but you're better off to have your distance.
Yep. Now, I mean, with how combat like is in this game. I mean, like, I don't know. Melee just didn't seem like a good option, for me. However, because the game more or less scares you into it, like I had that club on me the entire game. I never used it once, but like, and it upgraded. So I got the club 2 and then the club 3 or whatever, but again, like never used it. There's just like and I don't remember how it announces it to the player, but it says more or less like you should I think it might be one of the police guys or one of the characters in the police station or something. You should have this on you at all times and blah blah blah, just in case. And so
well, and I learned you can't drop the club off. You always have to have one of the clubs with you. You can't.
Oh, so you can't even remove it.
You can't get rid of it. It won't let you. There's a few items that won't be dropped off, and you always have to have a club with you. So well, I guess that's kind of smart.
Yeah, it's a failsafe from developer point of view.
There's going to be somebody out there who throws all their ammo in the trash for some dumb reason. Because I don't know how the only other thing I will say though is I remember there was later in the game I was using a gun that had the 5 shots and I was thinking that was cool, and learns out that no, actually more shots are not better. But or the machine guns, those things kind of blow through ammo, and I kind of realized I'm like, that might be a way that you would run out of ammo is if you were using machine guns and like high shooting pistols a little too often. Because I think you're better off using guns like shotgun, or well, you actually don't get the shotgun until the crisis building. I take that back. Using things like, which is weird. I think the shotgun would have been one of the initial guns. I don't know why that's saved for so far later. But grenade launcher, rifle, all that stuff. I think those are kind of the better ones, the lower shotguns, because then you'll never run out of ammo. But if you use the machine gun that shoots 10 rounds at once, maybe you will blow through that pretty quick.
Yeah. No, I mean, and maybe that's a whole, like I said, there's so many variables in this game that like you could have so many different play experiences. For me, again, running grenade launcher and like the M4 early on, the M4 fires 2 shots per AP bar. The grenade launcher fires 2 shots per AP bar, so like I never like had an ammo problem really,
No.
So.
Well, and the other thing I kind of learned too is every single time it has multiple shots is it does less damage. So you technically do the same damage from 1 to like shot 5, but what happens is if you have 5, you just split that damage to 5 times. Really? So you're almost better off just having it be lower. Because what I learned is I turned this to my AK-47 later on, was that it was an AK-47 that fired shotgun rounds. It was really bizarre, but that's how I because I had the perk where it had the scatter shot like a shotgun, and then I had 3 turns though, so I had 3 turns of 1 shot each, so that it was able to do like 600 damage each time. Jesus. And then I had cyanide rounds that practically killed any regular enemy in about 1 to 2 hits.
See, and this is what I'm talking about, man. Like I need to. I'm not ready to do it, like, because we got more things to go play. But eventually, I'm gonna go back to this and go like play around more with all the systems and toys and stuff that are in this game. Because I feel like my experience was very vanilla. It was just start to finish, play through the game.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That's what I wanted. Out of this. The other thing I'm super excited about is like, I bought a PS1 game and I completed it. It's not just to sit on my shelf for it to look pretty, and me get something out of it in 20 years. But no, I mean, like, yeah, it feels so good to like have retro stuff, buy a retro game and play through it. And like for the first time, and whatnot. This was just such a cool experience. So
no, there definitely is some, because it's one of those ones, like a lot of times if I ask myself, I'm like, well, realistically, let's be honest, playing games on like the emulation version, I know there's always people who want to tell you it's kind of like, oh no, like the original system's always kind of better. And it's kind of like it's the same way when people tell you that like records are better. It's like, no, records are not better than CDs or anything like that. You're just lying. They're cool looking, they're nostalgic sounding and everything. But I do still appreciate. It's like playing a game. Like sometimes, like, because I've had like I just have my Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis hooked up, and I'll play the cartridges straight on there and whatnot. And it's like, I don't got save states or anything like that. You just kind of play around, see how far you get. That's it. Okay, whatever. I'll come back to it again. There's some games. It's like if I was gonna play it really seriously, I don't know if I want to do it that way. But no, it's cool though to take the PlayStation game and go all the way through and be glad that like you don't get like, this is always the scary thing nowadays, is that you get like say like 3/4 of the game, and then you realize that like, oh, the disc has a little bit of a scratch on it, and it won't load past that. That's the other fear I always kind of have too. I'm not saying that can't happen on emulators, because Parasite Eve 2 is a perfect example of, I had a freezing issue on that game that I could never get past back when I tried to play through that one in the 2000s after playing the first one. But
oh man,
but for the most part, yeah, there's always kind of that. But yeah, no, that's, I mean, there's so much stuff you can kind of do in like the new game plus in this game too. And as I said, it's kind of weird because there's a bunch of great items that I feel like they save in the Chrysler building, which is cool in some ways, but at the same time, I felt like I wish some of that stuff was a little bit more just spread throughout the main game. Just like shotguns. Like, why is shotguns not? Why are they? That's a weird item to save for later on.
Yep.
You know. And gosh, they give you the rocket launcher early on, but they don't give you a shotgun. Like, okay.
Right. Yep. Well, anyway, sorry to throw us on another tangent there, but yeah. So we're in the zoo, and really, going back to story is what I should say. Really, like I think the biggest takeaway out of this chapter is that Aya finally like learns more about mitochondria, learns more about like what Eve is actually doing, or what the plans are, you know, which is just to eradicate all of life, you know, and rebuild in her own image, you know, more or less, and create the ultimate being, you know. It's very yeah. Like I don't know how to describe it. It's very
it's just kind of very classic Japanese in a sense.
Yeah.
You know, because you go to well, there is one scene where you find this dude named Dr. Clamp, who is a pivotal role character and whatnot, and you have to go to the museum, and you go there with Daniel and whatnot, and the guy's kind of pissy that you're there in the first place, you know. But he sits down, he gives you this lecture on mitochondria and what it does and what it is in your body, and Daniel's just like, I don't give a shit about this stuff, like,
yep.
like, I didn't come here to read, you fucking nerd,
right? Well, I remember when I'm sitting through that. So I get super sick on Monday this past week or whatever, you know. Call into work, and I was just like, man, like I'm just not feeling good, you know. So I go you should have just said my mitochondria is off. Yeah, my mitochondria is off, you know. So I take like a nap in the morning, you know, like I'm up at 6 or whatever. I text my boss, I text Matt, I text everybody. I'm just like, I'm not coming in today, PTO, whatever, you know. Take a couple hour nap. I wake up at 9. I'm feeling like a little bit better at this point. And then I sit down, and this is what I do for that day is like from this point where we're at right now, like Natural History Museum and whatnot, I play from there to the end of the game. So good though, dude. The Natural History Museum section and running into Clamp. Dr. Clamp. And hearing what he has to say about mitochondria and your cells, and they react in this way due to this and oxygen, and these things are mixing and blah blah, and he's just going on and on and on and on, and I'm like sitting there like semi-sick, like reading this on a CRT halfway across the room, like, am I in a science lesson right now? Like literally, like I feel like I'm in school right now, like I'm learning so much about and come to find out that most of it, I mean, like outside of the, like the crazy stuff going on in this game, like most of that's true. Like most of that's real, and like it's so cool. So, but I remember texting you at that point and going like, what the fuck? Like, why? It's just going on and on and on about cells and, genetics and blah, 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 that and the other. And it's like, Jesus. Like I'm watching Metal Gear, Like,
yeah, because they really go on there about talking about it and so on like that. That's why, as we were talking before about for the fact that this game doesn't have like voiceover or something like that. I'm kind of glad because there's a lot of dialogue in here, and I feel like it would take forever if you had to listen to it. Yep. It's kind of nice that you can read it and so on like that. But no, it's kind of cool because they take a lot of real science stuff and just run with it, because that's how I say the book / movie, because I watched the movie part. Is that it kind of plays sort of like a Michael Crichton type thing. Because, all the Michael Crichton books are always like that, where, like, you got your story, but he'll just sit down and just science you for a bit and, whatnot. And I think that's literally how that book reads, and that's how that story in Japan kind of happens. It's kind of very similar. It's like a lot of the elements are kind of the same things of, like, what happens. Like, the short and simple, I guess, of, like, the movie is that there's like a doctor guy and his wife, and they've been married for like a year, and it's like their like 1 year anniversary. And of course, she gets in this car accident where she was unable to control her body, and then she crashes in the back of like a semi truck, and then a big old pillar slides backwards off the semi truck and smashes her face.
No, of course.
You know, and she's barely alive and whatnot. And then like he gets to the hospital, and then everybody's like, "Well, they did say she was an organ donor, so you might we carve her up." He's like, "She's not dead yet." She's like, Buddy, come on.
Yeah, come on.
Did you see her face back there? Like, you know, like I know she's sort of holding on, but she's not gonna make it.
Yeah.
And then he does a weird thing. He's like, well, okay, sure. He's like, was there like dude, there's a little girl, you know, she's gonna need that kidney and everything like that. Like, come on, dude, it's a little girl. You gonna let a little girl die? And he's all, well, here's the part. You got to give me her liver. And the doctor's like, what? He's like, don't question, just give me her liver. When you take the kidney, but give me her liver. And so he takes the liver back, and he's like back at his place, and then he starts to combine it with the Eve stuff that he's been working on, and then it ends up like infecting that, and then it ends up infecting that possesses that little girl, and so on. So it's like he believes like his wife comes back. I think in the book it's more like she comes back more like mutacious, kind of like how the game is.
Really? Okay.
In the movie, I think probably just because of budget wise, they make it feel more like it's like she kind of comes back, you know, maybe symbolically more, a little more ghostly like almost in a sense. Maybe she's there, maybe she's not, maybe it's this guy.
Okay.
But so it's kind of similar to the way that instead in the game, it's Aya and her sister Maya. They have real creative names when they chose those.
Yep.
You know, whatever. Like they get, or her sister gets in like a car accident, I think, like in the 70s or whatnot, and then she ends up switching, you know, kidneys and a cornea. Yeah. With the chick that initially becomes Eve and so on. So there's this weird mixed match mitochondria thing that still is always a little bit kind of confusing. Yeah, you know, said surgery happened, something, you know, scientists, something went wrong science-wise, they experimented on it, and now one of them's possessed. And because of that surgery, Aya's also got the abilities too, because she was, you know, she has a transferred eye.
Yep. And lots of clamp, because basically like at this point, like while we're in the museum and like the warehouse and all that comes after, this is more or less like where we learn about, so up until this point we know Eve is evil. Eve wants to kill things. Eve is killing things in front of us. They're making people disappear. They're turning into crazy amalgamations and whatnot. But this is the point where we finally learn about Eve's reproductive side of things, and like learning about the ultimate being, and like, you know, how she wants to create this thing and blah blah blah. And the game just starts on and on and on about sperm, so much about sperm. And it's like I'm just reading that word over and over and over in so many different dialogue sections, and I'm like, I get it, game. I get it. Okay, we got this pervy fucking scientist dude that just wants to fuck themselves, you know, and just make the ultimate thing. And it's like, why? You know, so.
I think this literally has to have the Guinness Book World Record of sperm being said more times than any other story. I'm going to say book, movie, video game, I don't care what it is. Like, it says it so much. And then to top it off, you literally by like level 4, you literally go to a sperm bank where there's a sperm container thrown on the ground. It's covered all over the floor. Aya's stepping in it and everything like that. It's everywhere. It's on the walls. It's on the ceiling. Like, Eve went in there and just had her pick of whatever one she wanted. Yeah, so it's like, it's one of those ones that's like, wow, that's there a lot, you know, and so on. I mean, even so much so, it's like, I think is it after the Central Park battle that, yeah, I think it is. So you have a boss battle again in Central Park with, you know, Eve once again. And then you wake up, and this is the weirdest one. Aya just wakes up in this like dingy ass like apartment building with some random Japanese guy just sitting around her. There's literally a burn barrel inside the house.
Just like the cracked in.
She's just laying on this like heroin den bed, you know, and then all of a sudden Daniel comes in. He's like she's fine.
This is normal.
This is normal. Here you are, you know. Yeah. And this is where we meet kind of our other like main protagonist guy, Maida. or whatnot, who pretty much, he's the one who fills in all like the novel stuff from Japan, because since he's Japanese, he's like, I heard about it and I wanted to run down there and see what happened, because I heard also in Japan there, this lady Eve was trying to create the ultimate being, because that was the same thing in that story too. Is that guy created the woman, then the woman wanted to create the ultimate being by literally like mating with him, and then even though it looked like his wife, but it wasn't his wife anymore, kind of that sort of turn of.
So the introduction of Maeda is that scene where he's like walking across the street and there's a handful of police officers and they stop him and they're asking like, where are you from or whatever. And like, again, I was like sick and like, trying to play through this and whatnot. Like, is there some like subtle tones of racism in there? Because like the way that those cops are talking to him and they're just like, more or less like asking, like, where are you from? And he's like, Japan. And they're just like, I forgot exactly what the words were, but there was like, well, you don't belong here, get out of our country type thing or whatever. And I'm reading that going like, especially in today's context. And I'm like, I'm like, is that really what the Japanese think of like what an NYPD officer is? It's so
well. I think you're kind of right, because I do remember that part too, when they first kind of show him, as those guys are a little bit hostile towards him and whatnot. And I think because it is a Japanese game, like they could kind of write that in there and be like, look at, because probably I bet you one of those guys at Squaresoft was like, I went to New York once and I got hassled for being Japanese. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was wondering, man. Because like it was so out of place. It was just like, what is this? Like why did that happen? Because after he leaves and like goes into that area and meets Aya and everything, like everything else is fine from that point on. But yeah, it was just such a random scene, of just like these white police officers just harassing this Japanese guy as he's crossing the street. It's just like, what the fuck.
But then Maeda's for some reason living in like the trashiest apartment like in Soho. So I don't know. Maybe he is up to no good. Let's be honest. He literally has a burn barrel just ripping inside the building.
Yep.
There's just junk and trash. It's like actually the way that room's like designed and drawn out is pretty like, I just love just like the detail of it, because it just is so kind of nasty looking and so on.
It's dingy.
And, but that's where you find him, and then of course Maeda wants to go visit the lab at some point, where Dr. Clamp is, and they just barge in there, and Dr. Clamp's like, "The hell are you doing?" He's like, "You just came in, thought you could just draw some blood and just look at it." He's like, "Use my equipment." That's like that's a $10,000 microscope right there. You got your dirty Japanese fingerprints all over it.
Exactly.
Everybody's just very hostile towards it. It's like one of those ones, but that's where they kind of realize it, because Maeda takes some of the blood from Aya, and he realizes that it shows it in a cool like CG cutscene that like her blood's almost it has the mitochondria stuff going on, but it's kind of resistant to it, and that's why she's able to pretty much walk through all this stuff and not get affected by it and whatnot, because she has the powers herself. That's what causes her magic and all that stuff.
Yep. Yeah. The whole of chapter 4 in the hospital and the I thought it was super cool, because like at this point, like the science side of things are ramping up so goddamn high. We're learning so much about who Aya is. She's having like these crazy flashbacks. She's starting to recognize, like who this Dr. Clamp is, who this, but still, it's just like has this very streamlined goal of like, we need to stop Eve. And like that's everybody's path is like, we need to stop this and whatnot. But again, the way that the delivery of the story happens is very natural. It flows well. It feels good. It keeps you engaged. It doesn't hit you like minus that one scene of when you first run into Dr. Clamp and he just exposition dumps onto you about all these cells and mitochondria. Outside of that was like the one thing that felt like a bit overwhelming, that could have been kind of trickle feeded a little bit better. But literally outside of that, I think the rest of this game is like just so solid in how it does its deliveries and whatnot. So
No, yeah, that's the thing is the whole way through the story, the locations, and everything like that. And I think because it always feels like it's changing up quite a bit too. You don't feel like you're retracing the same paths over and over again. You know, you're always going each day. You're in a completely different looking part of New York and so on like that. You know, and each location's really cool looking. You know, even because like when you're in the hospital and you're in the sperm bank section and whatnot like that, just the whole design of that building and what you go through there, and you meet a couple nurses. You realize that this is also the same hospital that Aya had the transplant a long time ago, along with her sister Maya, and so on like that. So like you see all these kind of things coming together and whatnot just throughout each one of these days and so on.
Well, in this chapter in particular, right at the end, it's boss fight, the centipede boss fight in this, it took me for like probably 5 or 6 tries, you know, to get through. And the problem is that the save point that I had directly before that wasn't terribly far to that point. Like it would take me about like maybe 3 minutes of running and like 2 random encounters to get to this fight. But it being a multi-phase fight, and again, like I wasn't upgrading my weapons at this point. I wasn't like there was like a bunch of things that like now that I know, I'm gonna, you know, eventually one day go back and probably just smash through all of this like really easily. But this section, this boss fight gave me so much fucking trouble until I beat it. Once I beat it, then I got the XP to where chapter 5 like wasn't that bad, you know, thereafter. But you know, the centipede boss fight in general, I think was like my first like difficulty spike, you know, like in the wall. It really beat the shit out of me for sure, you know.
Yeah, because that one definitely gets tough. And then it's like once you beat the hospital, it's like now it gives you 2 paths to go, and one of them's technically a bonus path. You don't have to go there, but there's that one where I think it's the docks or whatever you can go to, and you go fight that crab monster. Did you do that one? So that one, like, you go there, because that was the one I texted you. I was like, oh, watch out for going to this area, because, like, the difficulty spikes really high right about this point. Well, it turns out it's a bonus area, because all you're going there for is the rocket launcher, is you can get from there. Which I hate to first say, I never really used the rocket launcher. I used it, like, twice, and I was like, oh, okay.
See, so I picked up rockets, like the ammo for it, but I never found the actual rocket launcher.
So, yeah, you had to kill this crab boss. It was a little bit tough. It wasn't god awful, because there's at least some strategy you kind of use to him, but he is definitely like a lot harder. But if you did the thing where you maybe did Chinatown first and then went and fought the crab monster, I think you'd be probably pretty good, because I did it the other way around, where I went to the crab thing first. And just the enemies in that area too, they're just like those kind where it's like, yeah, they'll just, so every once in a while just the regular enemies will just kill you. You're like, oh geez, okay. And they're not really good to train against, because they don't really give you the greatest like experience. It's just they're just tough. You know. And it's just a short little area, but you do get the rocket launcher, but really nothing else out of it. So if you bypass it, you're not missing much other than just seeing a part of the game just for, you know, just to have it for the collection.
Yep. So Centipede, fucking stupid hard. But after finally getting through that, now we're like diving down deeper into like sewers and stuff. And the next enemy type that really bugged me was so there's certain enemies in this game that just like cast what am I trying to say, effects on you, more or less, you know.
Yeah,
the slow I can deal with, you know, where you have cramps and shit, you know, like whatever that thing is. Poison, okay, I just gotta out heal it, you know, whatever. But fucking blind, dude, or dark, and what they call it in this game. Yeah, blind is the worst, dude. Like, because it
stupid bats in the sewers. That's literally like one of the worst enemies. And there's a couple other birds that will do that to you as well. Like the pterodactyl will do it to you later in the game and so on. And I think what makes it so terrible, I mean, I hate it in pretty much any RPG. I don't, you know, whenever it happens in Final Fantasy and whatnot, it's a pain in the ass. But at least in Final Fantasy, you mostly have 2 or 3 other people stand next to you. So if one person goes blind, it's not the end of the world. Where like if Aya goes blind, it's like, well, fuck.
Well, there's 20 seconds of my time. I'm just running around waiting, you know?
Well, and then it's like, I hate to sort of say it, because like sometimes I kind of learn, it's like, is it best just to try to bully through it and just hopefully hope that like her 10% accuracy will actually work out? But most of the time it's like, God, it's like you almost never hit anything. And I mean, you could do a spell. Well, I don't think you could actually do a spell. Is there a spell to cure blindness? There is the full heal way later on, but I don't know if you had it by that.
No,
I don't know if you had it by that point.
Items. I think it's just items at this point.
So you have the items, but most likely that's what happens. You use the item, and then guess what the bat does next? It does the supersonic wave at you again, and then you're blind again. So the best thing to do is I just felt is I'd run around right when it did the supersonic wave. I would shoot it, run around, wait for it to do the supersonic, and do it. But man, that's the only downfall. That sewer thing.
Yes, because that annoyed the living shit out of me. And luckily, up until this point, I have been collecting Cure Ds forever. So I had 1 billion of them, so I brought them with me. But like you said, as soon as you take, the cure, for that ailment or whatever, it's like you're almost already getting hit by another one anyways, The best way to handle those fights for me was haste, go fast, bait all those things to where you can group them into a corner of the map or whatever that you're in, or at least the view that you're looking at, and then keep them there. Like try to just like manipulate the AI by running back and forth just to kind of keep them there. And having all 3 bats like in one corner or whatever was so much more manageable because like they would do their little supersonic thing or whatever, and like I would just be able to just like move to the upper right corner and then move down to the bottom left corner, or like move around in that regard. The other thing that this game does very well is that it has really good sound design too. Cues for those things were pretty recognizable, almost every time. It's just once you get hit and then you have a 10 to 15 second or however long it is, like debuff timer, essentially not being able to hit anything, like while you're doing that and, managing positioning and whatnot. Like, yeah, it was so annoying. I don't mind, like I said, poison, fine, whatever. Like I can still attack, I can still move, I can still, like all these things. Again, like just like abilities, I mean, not abilities, effects on the character in general are okay, except for this one because there's nothing you can do about it. It literally is there to waste your time.
Yeah.
It's a difficulty layer, I guess. It can add difficulty or whatever. But when these bats like literally aren't doing anything other than casting this like supersonic thing at you, like it's literally just a waste of time, and like that's frustrating as a player. So if I was to give this game like one little ding on the, like the scoreboard or whatever, like that's probably one of them. Is just like there's certain ailments that are just insanely annoying to deal with. For no real reason other than to waste your time.
Yeah, exactly. There's a perk, and I can't remember if I found it later for your armor, but just like there's an auto heal one, there's also an auto one that does the status items.
Yeah.
Which I think I threw that on, but I want to say I almost threw that on like totally towards the tail end of like the Chrysler building because I had to wait till I got the super tool and limited, which you have to trade into Wayne all the trading cards. It's good luck getting that anytime sooner.
Yep.
But once I finally did, so I guess technically on my round 3, if I wanted to, I have all these perks and abilities that might make that good. Well, because it's weird because I even got an ability at one point earlier that was like, it had like you could throw it on your armor and it was supposed to like nullify the blindness and so on. And I remember having it on there and I still got blind. So it probably just does the thing. Maybe it does it 50% less or something like that. So I'm like, I want 100%, damn it. Like, I want to never be, because poison's one of those ones, like pretty much in almost any RPG, poison's like whatever. It's like, I mean, the only time it kind of sucks is if you're battling like a real hard boss battle and that poison just happens to now be just that one extra thing that's just draining your health slowly in the background. But for most times, poison's just like, whatever. And, just like Parasite Eve, literally once the battle's over, the poison goes away, so it's not that big of a deal. There's some of those old like 80s RPGs where the poison's like, no, you better cure that.
Stick around.
Or even Pokemon even sticks around with it too. It's like, no, you're gonna watch the screen flash until you fix this problem.
You can ding 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 ding.
But so like poison's like whatever, it never gets in the way. Yeah, this is the slow or the the cramps and whatnot. That can kind of suck every once in a while when a boss comes right at you. You're like, well, I guess I'm here, but. But yeah, that blindness down in the sewers that's what makes that part kind of tough. Because beyond that, it actually wouldn't be that bad of a training ground. It is kind of one of those areas that at first I will say that like before you kind of get your bearings, it seems like, oh shit, this is going to be very overwhelming at how many rooms there is. And there's a lot of rooms down there, but then you realize they're all on like maybe like a 6x4 grid.
Yeah,
you know, so they're kind of easy to follow. Just include the fact that there's a bat like every 3 rooms.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a ton of items down there too. You know, that I was finding.
That's the one place where I think you get the first and maybe only super tool in the kind of standard gameplay.
Gotcha.
There might be a second one, but you do find one down there, which is kind of nice. And it's well worth searching that area. It's definitely a kind of a time sink, but you know, if it wasn't for the bats, it wouldn't be so bad because you'd be like, I'm leveling up and finding items and all kinds of stuff. But those stupid bats,
Yep.
You know,
really
it wouldn't
annoying.
take much. Yeah.
And then in this particular section, because this is day 5. At some point in the sewers, Aya finally finds that blob of, you know, people that were from the zoo from earlier, you know, that Eve killed, and it like fully like escapes into like the sewer system and whatnot. Now we're like properly chasing it. Is more or less like what's going on at this point in the game.
Yeah, well, and with the blob thing, I'm like, Aya literally pulls like the lever and it releases it like through the sewer system and whatnot to clear way so she can get by. And then it's like it starts forming into like Eve a little bit past this, but it's like it starts to maybe like Akira, where it's like Tetsuo just like absorbing everybody. It's just turning into this giant blob-like creature.
It's like Katamari.
Yeah, literally.
Yep.
And yeah, I think once you kind of get out of the sewer, you come back into like the subway station area and whatnot. You fight that other. Wait, is this where you fight the centipede at now?
No. Centipede was prior to this.
Okay.
Because from this, or from the centipede area, you go into the sewers.
Is that what? But I thought you went from Chinatown, then it went to the sewers, and then you come up to the. Because don't you? I could have swore you fought a centipede, or at least a centipede-like thing, is like right there at the subway station where it splits into 4 for its second form and starts spinning around you.
Yeah, because I think that's the end of chapter 4.
Really? For some reason, I thought you. No,
And then 5, like... we do Chinatown sewers. We go back to HQ at the NYPD.
Well, then you switch discs right here at the end of chapter 5, because you get to like the Brooklyn Bridge or something like that, and it's literally where like the disc.
Yeah, that's right. Because there's a cutscene that plays, but anyhow, however it goes, I don't recall off the top of my head, but that was also a novel thing. Getting to the end of that particular section, having that cutscene, and then all of a sudden the screen goes black, and then it pops up with the PE logo, and it says "Insert Disc 2," and it's like, fuck, I haven't seen that in years, you know, like forever.
Oh, it's funny because these are all these games. When I look at them, kind of nowadays, they're like the 2-disc ones. It's like it's realistically the only reason why this game's 2 discs is because it has so many cutscenes. Because gameplay wise, it's pretty darn short, realistically. Yeah. You know, and it's like strangely, it's like if this game wasn't an RPG, and let's just say it played like Dino Crisis or Resident Evil, it'd be like a 5-hour game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, like that's all it would be, which I guess is not that far off from like Dino Crisis 2 or something. But you know, it's because it's an RPG, and because it's got this. I mean, it's got a little bit more cutscenes because it's a Squaresoft game. You know, that's why you got the double disc going on here. Because when you switch to disc 2, realistically,
it's not
a whole lot. You got about one more, in a sense, chapter, and you got a lot of cutscenes here, and of course you go into the final boss battle. Technically, you also have. For the X game, this is where the Chrysler building's located. Though technically, I guess you could go there at any time because it's also on disc 1. But
is this the section? Is this a part? There's one piece that we may have missed earlier or whatever, but it's you're fighting Eve on a rooftop. I'm pretty sure that's where it is, and it's the crash scene with the plane.
Dude, I think that's literally I think that's the hospital. Really,
is that the hospital part? Okay.
I think that's the hospital boss battle, and I think the centipede one. I'm pretty darn sure the centipede is the subway station.
Okay. Yeah,
because that's actually a really cool. Because that's actually, I'll say that's kind of a survival horror moment. I will say is when you know that like you're battling. Well, I guess you're not really battling Eve yet because you battle another creature up there. It's like the one where almost the long distance weapons come in handy because he's like really far. You get a really wide battle field, and you kill that, and then it turns into something else. And I think Eve's might be there too. Yeah, she is, because she has that cutscene where she flies up.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a giant explosion behind her and whatnot. But there is that kind of dread where you know that this Harrier is coming down,
Yep.
or this F-16, whatever the heck it is, and it cuts back to you gameplay wise, and you just hear it getting closer and closer, and you're like, oh well, shit, what am I supposed to do here?
Right.
There's a giant hole. Nope, I can't go down there. There's stairs over there. They don't do anything, and then you find like, oh no, there's like a painter's
Yep.
or a window cleaner's thing over there. You jump on that. I'll say that's like one of those moments of like, it'd be interesting. I kind of would like to know what happens if you stay there. Just out of
You die. You die.
Did that happen to you?
Yes.
Is there a cutscene, or is it just
no? There's a whole cutscene. There's a whole cutscene, bro. So, and it's why I wanted to bring it up. I couldn't remember exactly where in the game it was, but yeah. So basically, like you get done with that fight up there or whatever, and you hear that Harrier coming in, the plane coming in. I just did not see the painters, or the window washers, like little ride thing that they go up and down on the side of buildings on. I just straight up didn't see it. And I was running around trying to figure out, like, where do I go? Where do I go? Where do I go? And then out of nowhere, the game just like, kind of fades to black real quick. It's goes into its like 3D rendering, like cutscene style, or whatever. And Aya's just running across this rooftop, just bolting across this rooftop, and you see the Harrier in the background like coming towards her, and then it comes down and it crashes, and this big explosion happens, and Aya jumps, and it's just like, this big flailing moment or whatever, and then it just goes game over. And it's like, oh, like I thought I triggered like a special scene or something, or maybe, because at that point I had no idea what was supposed to happen. I thought that you're just supposed to hang out up there until the plane comes, and Aya just like jumps off the side of the building and lives or something. Nope. You just straight up die. So, but that's it. No. And then I had to revert back, go back through 2 random encounters, go back through that fight all over again, just to figure out where you're supposed to go. And I did it the second time. So
yeah, exactly. Because I thought the first, because when I was like, I couldn't remember exactly what to do, and I was like, I saw it. Just I'm like, maybe this. I'm like, okay, it is, and she jumps into there. But I did kind of wonder what happens if you stayed up there.
Yep. If you're gonna have, and this plays into the final boss as well. If you're going to have instant death things in your game, you need checkpoints. Like 100% you need checkpoints, especially in these games, and I can't really like fault it because this game is of an older era. But any new developers, if you ever decide to do a spiritual successor that I would adore to see, please, dear God, either don't do instant death, or if you're going to do instant death, make checkpoints viable, please. Because like there was too many times in this game that were like, and there's really only 2. I think it's here. I think it's this scene where instant death, and then the scene later on that we'll get to here in a bit. But I don't know. It's annoying. It sucks. It's a time waste. Please no, And yep. I think that's kind of my common theme about like things that annoyed me with this game more so than anything were just like things that were time sinks, like that just completely wasted my time for no reason.
And, I'm just going to come back and say that's why I think I like this game personally on an emulator, because it's nice to have the save states, because, like that's, I use the standard save as like the backup save, and then I just use save states, because the way I look at save states is like, it just saves me time that like I don't have to go back and be like, like you right there, you could have saved at least like right when you beat the boss, and then you could have retried that thing again and go, oh, okay, there it is right down there. Yep. You already beat the boss. You already beat those 2 enemies beforehand. It's just making you do more time. And I feel for this game, the save states are they're just nice. Yep. You know what I mean? It's not one of those games where, it's just like they come in handy, and believe me, the final boss, which I will get to, I don't want to spoil anything quite yet, but we'll get to it. But bro, I did that boss fight 4 times, all the way through, 4 times. No, sorry, 3 times. We'll get to it. Yeah, it's a long. We're getting close, but yeah. So there was that scene there and so on like that, and then I guess that takes us back to what we're going into. We're going into disc 2, and then disc 2, you finally go back to the museum. You go back to Dr. Clamp's office and so on like that. But now Eve, because it's a history of natural history museum, whatever, she in the dino exhibits going on, so Eve has now turned all the kinds of dinosaurs loose, so you actually get a proto like dino crisis in this time period where you fight some, you know, all kinds of mutated versions of kind of like raptor like creatures, compasauruses, pterodactyls, a stegosaurus, and of course you get a battle of big bad T-Rex.
No, and this was like probably my favorite part of the game in general. I think it was so much fun to just like go around, see all the different, again, you know, like this game just has like numerous amounts of enemy design anyways, you know, and to see it actually work well within the storyline too of like, oh, we have this amalgamation of mitochondria that, you know, Eve killed all those people back in chapter 2 in the, you know, the zoo or the, you know, Central Park or whatever. And these things are now like taking over control of like fossils and bones and shit, and like, you know, turning into like velociraptors and like, you know, triceratops and like, you know, like all this like really cool stuff, you know, like it's very it's very unique, you know, and I love the artistry with it all, you know, like, I mean, it was very creative is what I'll say. Very creative.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And then there's even parts throughout that area where like you can click on things and it makes it feel like it's supposed to be a puzzle, but it's like it's just there for you to like you know, almost interact with it like if you were actually in the museum. It's kind of an interesting one. Because I will say that's the other thing about this one too, for the fact of it being kind of in that survival horror category, it ironically has like almost no puzzles. You know, it's got like a couple key card collecting, slap it in the machine, make sure the wires are connected, and bada bing, bada boom, there you go. But it's strange that there actually, there was no puzzles. I thought that was kind of a weird thing.
I really only ever got turned around a couple times because the other thing is, oh boy, there's no map, you know, like at all. But I don't think that this game doesn't need it like at all. It's a pretty linear experience in general, you know, which I think is good, you know.
No, I think that's actually one of the best parts about Parasite Eve is especially just for like the first playthrough. You really don't need much of a guide at all for it. Like it's pretty much, you know where to go. You never really get terribly lost or anything like that. And you never get stuck. The only thing that I ever felt like I looked up later on was just some of those small things like, what the hell does that junk do? And then like, you know, I feel like if you didn't, I really have to say this. I don't know how many people actually figured out what that junk did on their own. If somebody told you they did, I don't even know if I'd even believe them. I feel like that's the one you had to like look in the strategy guide. You're like, oh, that's what it does. You know what I mean? And
the only
because I
thing
hate to sort of say is like nobody would bring 300 pieces to Wayne just randomly going like spending you'd have to spend like 3 hours doing that, like, you know, it's like if not more. It's like, yeah, right, are you just going to be out there just like harvesting junk that you don't even know when the end of that number is, right?
Yeah, exactly, you know. And like, and you just think of the amount of like inventory space you need to even do that, you know, or like think about it this way, like the amount of things that you don't carry with you, you know, in lieu of those things, you know, like why would you ever do that for an item called junk, you know? That thing like intrigued me, I guess, you know, enough, you know, and like that's why I kept a couple of them and I turned it into the dude. But as soon as I turned it in, he's like, oh, I'll get rid of those for you, and then that was it. Like no meter, no counter, no nothing, you know. It's just like, okay, I guess it's literally just here just to fill up my inventory, you know? So
yeah, I'm glad he's taking the recycle out for me. I don't have to do it myself. That's what it feels like, yeah.
But, so where are we at story-wise? Because, like, eventually we get onto a
well, we're at the history of the Natural History Museum. We're fighting the dinosaurs. We go through all those. We go back to Dr. Clamp's lab one more time, and I think he's fried at this point. He's literally dead there. But we do find more information on his computer and whatnot throughout this that kind of starts to leak. Like that's like the third time we go here, and we get a little bit more information on Eve and everything like that, and so on. And then, of course, you get the key. You're able to explore more through here. You go through all these boss battles. I will say there's actually one more kind of like, I guess you say jump scare part, is where you walk to that one room and the Triceratops literally pushes you through and shoves you off the edge. Because at first it's like, holy shit, what's going on here? You know? And then you got to fight the T-Rex and so on like that. And that's actually one of the tougher battles too, you know? That's where that liberation you finally pretty much have about that building. It starts to come really in handy at this point. This part of the game, I'd say that the absolute hardest portion of the game, I think, was this
It's probably the sewers for me, in general. By the time you get through the couple boss fights through there and you end up here and you start fighting all these things, like your XP gain is off the fucking chain by the time you get to this point. Every single fight that I went into, I never had any problems, never like thought I was going to die, like anything like that, you know. Triceratops gave me a little bit of trouble here and there. Not so bad. T-Rex, kind of. But again, like I basically walked through day 6, you know, in this, and just got to end game up until the final fight, I guess, you know.
Well, I do think these dinosaurs are kind of set up to be a place to be like, hey, do you need to catch up on your levels? Well, here's your chance. I definitely think this area is made 100% to be like that. That's kind of the nice thing about this game is it's designed kind of like in a safe style where like you shouldn't really mess up too much. I mean, like literally they give you the club just in case you blow through 1,000 rounds. Here you go. Here's your club. You know, hey, you need some more experience points? Not a problem. You know what I mean? We got these dinosaurs here. I mean, technically you could always go back to other areas too, because the hospital was always a pretty good one for training too. But you know, you get here and you go to the top, and now we found Eve is up there, and she's pregnant as all can be and whatnot, and you know she's got her tits hanging out and everything like that and whatnot. Just, you know, this giant monster, this whole craziness and so on, and she's like, I'm gonna give birth, you know, get out of my way. You know, and she kind of escapes out of there in her, like, you know, Akira style Tetsuya like mold of all these people just like mutated into her. And then after we get to this point, we cut to like now the military's out there with like, or like the Navy's out there, and they got their ships, and they realize that the Statue of Liberty's been like contaminated and so on. They're like, well, that's okay, it was given to us by the French, blow it up.
Yeah. Remove it.
Like nobody questions that one bit. That like, hey, you know what? We just blew up Statue of Liberty. Nobody has any remorse. Now they just whatever. Forget it.
Yep. I'm trying to see if I have any notes around this area. By this point in the game, by the time we get to the so eventually we end up on the USS Nimitz, which is a ship, you know, or whatever. And by this point, like, it was getting later in the day. Again, this is still Monday from a few days ago, you know, like I was like still like pretty sick, like not feeling the greatest and whatnot, just trying to get through this last little section here. But the whole environment here I thought was pretty cool. It very much reminded me of was it Revelations 2, where we end up in the ship at the end of the game, you know, and whatnot. Like, it very much felt like that. But
yeah, no, and on the ship here now we're starting to get to like the final battle. There's some real cool cutscenes that happen, like that they send Aya like in a jet to. They're like, just like, sure, get in here. You know, I know you're just a police officer, but fly this thing in the battle. And well, it's got autopilot. Just flip that switch on. You're good to go. And pretty much Aya gets out there, and then you have to fight pretty much Eve, I guess, in like her kind of final form. Finish her off. I can't remember. She might have a second form or something. There's a lot of forms. But then she hatches out the ultimate being, and this giant-headed baby thing pops up on the deck.
This is the most goofy. Like, so for, again, putting myself into that brain of when this game came out, it's like, okay, it's still goofy as fuck looking, but like I can see like maybe there's a little bit of like, ooh, that's kind of gross or creepy, maybe, you know, like that's kind of what I was thinking. But straight up, dude, this thing is just like, it's a big fucking purple baby with its brain sticking out of its head, and like, you know, like way oversized, you know, brain and all this, with like these dinky little wings that kind of flap around, and it's just like, and it's noises that it makes, dude. It's just like, I was expecting like a loud like scream or like a, you know, like something like that, but it's just like, you know, like you're fucking pathetic, dude. Like, what are you?
It's just that, you know, the team's like or yelling like, hey, make sure she gets an abortion.
Yeah, exactly.
Here, take the rocket launcher.
Yeah, exactly. Here's the coat
and hanger. The clothes hanger.
Yeah, the clothes hanger. Replace your melee weapon.
It's like that. That's like you know, Maida's got that special weapon he wants to give you.
Yeah.
A clothes hanger at the end.
Scramble it up, dude.
You know.
Yeah,
So yeah,
so,
you fight this baby and it goes through multiple forms like it's Frieza from Dragon Ball Z.
yeah. So phase one, and I had only really used liberate at this point, the ability, or liberation or whatever, the ability, like a handful of times. So I didn't really know like how much damage it would actually do or whatever, but pretty consistently, because I had to do this fucking fight 3 times over. Phase one, baby, easy, dude. Just hit it with that once, it's dead, you know.
Yeah.
And like the thing just like lights on fire, and then all of a sudden it spawns into phase two, and phase two is like the adolescent size or style thing. In the first run of this fight, I did the same thing. Liberate was back up again, PE bar maxed out, cool, bam, you know, hit it. Same thing. One run of that ability against that thing, it killed it, you know. Third phase pops up. Now it's in its like its adulthood or whatever. It's not final form, but it's in its adult. And this is where the fight starts to get tough, in my opinion, because not only can he do like crazy amount of melee damage, but some of it, the projectiles and stuff that this thing does, is like pretty difficult to manage. I got through that just fine enough in my first run, and then it goes into phase 4, and this is like the ultimate final, you know, phase or whatever. The being itself doesn't touch you, it doesn't hurt you whatsoever, but all it has is like these little like cube things like that kind of jet around the screen, and they just like shoot projectiles at you and whatnot. By this point, like, I'm just hammering it with literally everything I have, you know, like anything offensive that I have, I'm just hammering it with it over and over and over again, but I'm only doing 1 damage, you know, because it has like whatever ability on it. But yeah, eventually, like, you hammer the thing enough, and and then it dies, you know. And then is the bullshit section, which I'll hold off on because I want to hear your opinion about the multi-phase fight. And
exactly.
I have a little bit more of a story to tell too. So
well, and ironically, mine's kind of a little bit of race because I played the game over again, and by the time I went through that multi-phase fight last night, I had my 450 upgraded gun and went bam, 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 bam. Just every single time it was just like, and the only one did the one where it does 1 damage. I still did 1 damage to it at that point because you just, I think you have to hit it like 20 times and then it's just over. It's supposed to make you feel like you're messing up and you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Something else? I'm supposed to use magic. What am I supposed to do? You know, and just like, no, you're just supposed to attack, and then it goes to the next one, and then it turns into this giant green crawling thing that looks like some weird evolution of Metapod from Pokemon. And this is like the part where it turns into like, I'll say this, it turns into, though it's linear enough, except for one part where like you have to make a choice of left or right, or up or down, or up or right, I mean. But it reminds me of like when the gameplay sort of changes at the very end of a game, and it's like now it's a completely different game than you're used to, and so it turns into one of these like hide and seek, in a sense, like survival horror games for a moment, or Runaway, and the creature has a 1-hit kill if you mess up and you touch it, you know. And that happened to me was I accidentally turned around one direction and ran back into it, you know. And I was like, oh no, okay, yes, that's not what I'm supposed to do, you know. And because that's one of those weird things that's like one of my pet peeves in survival horror games, and just any game that happens to have this feature, is I hate that kind of feature of like a creature that will kill you just instantaneous, like 1-hit kills. I think that's always really annoying. At least give me somewhat of a fighting chance. You can make it hard as balls, I don't care, but at least make it like it may be possible, but it's probably in my best interest not to fight it. You know, but like when it is that, like,
give it like especially with this, because directly before in the fight that we were just describing or whatever, there's mechanics in phase 3 that like drop your health to 1 health, you know, put you in a panic as a player. You learn something from that. Oh, that animation, fuck that, get away from that, because if I get hit, I'm going down to 1 HP, leaving me that vulnerable. Like, get rid of instant kill, give me a learning experience, because like all that my death to this thing taught me was, do not go through, you know, like I'll explain what happened. Basically, it's more or less what happened to you too. Granted, I'm playing on PS1 that I have to go all the way back before the fight just to get back to this point again. So yeah, you kill it, it turns into the floppy monster thing or whatever, and all of a sudden you're in a chase scene and you just gotta go, you know, like, and it's super linear too. Like, that was the thing. and I go through like 3 or 4 doors through load screens and whatnot. And on this one particular one, like I walk through the door, and this is another piece that I meant to mention earlier, is that when you walk through a door and you transition scenes or whatever, Aya will always be facing in the direction of the way that you need to go into the level. To not go back through that door that you came through, you know. So in this particular scene, I go through that 4th door or 3rd door or whatever, you know, and I screw up. I am holding an opposite direction to where I walk back through that door that I just came through, and immediately go through the load screen, and it fades out of black, and I like, you know, starts to walk forward for her first animation of walking through the door, and the mob's like right there, and I just touch it and instant die, and was just like,
no.
I have to go all the way back and go through that 4-phase fight again. And then I go all the way back and I go through that 4-phase fight, and I get to the adolescent side of things, and like just didn't manage my PE meter, didn't manage my resources well enough to get through that fight. So I die in the fight there. And then I go all the way back and I have to restart for a 3rd time. And I go all the way and I get to the 4th section of that fight or whatever and die to a projectile and go, fuck. I did it in my 4th run. I completed it in my 4th run. I got through that multi-phase fight. I saw that mob again. I'm like, okay, when I get through this particular door, hold right instead of left, you know, to walk through, and, you know, and then made it. And like literally there was like one more door past that, and then final cutscene, and it's like game over. And it's like,
you know, and that's one thing we did forget to mention is because we bring this up on so many of them, but this game doesn't utilize tank controls. It actually has an omnidirectional system, all technically Final Fantasy VIII. Once again, that's why I think it's kind of being like leading towards like the development of that game. I guess Final Fantasy VII has that too. But it's one of those ones where, though strangely enough, like in other games when, you know, it would bother me if it doesn't have tank controls, this one strangely actually works. It's like, I think because they designed the game around that it didn't need the tank controls, because once again, all the things, they don't load like Resident Evil camera angles and so on like that. I mean, it's still pre-rendered backgrounds and all that kind of stuff, but it loads like Final Fantasy levels. Yep. So like it feels more natural to run through them the way that Aya kind of is. Though once in a blue moon, if you are holding save right and it loads to a new screen and it happens to be she's facing the other direction, yeah, that will get you there. But I felt because of the load screens, you kind of have enough chance to stop, wait. Oh, okay, and then you move on. It's not like Resident Evil where you're running, and then you go through a screen and it just instantaneously changes. And then if you don't have those omnidirectional controls, now you're running the exact wrong way. Yeah,
it's the post-trauma problem. You know, like it's that. You know, like no, this game's controls are fucking great. Like in my opinion. Except for one other quick comment I'll say before we get to the final piece of all this. Aya is just slow, dude. Like she, especially in some of the wide angle scenes in the opera, in particular at the start, your very first like control of her once everybody burns down to the ground and, you know, Eve takes off and you need to go find her. There's like this really, really wide angle shot of that opera. And like, dude, like you have to, you know, push forward on the analog stick, and it's like every 2 steps she's taking feels like it should be 1 step, you know, like it's like tink, tink. Okay. 1 step, tink, tink, next step, you know. Anyways,
well, and that's where I'll say is like, there's 2 things actually. One is that this game would run perfectly at about 1.5 speed. I think that's what it needs. Like, it doesn't need to be too ridiculous fast, because that was always my problem that I sort of had when they made like the Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 like remasters on PlayStation and Xbox and all that stuff. Is that they put 3 times speed. I'm like, 3 times a little too fast. It makes it feel like you're running it like you're just like. I mean, if you're just training or something like that, it's not that big of a deal. But like 1.5, maybe 2 maximum would be that kind where it's like, okay, it's faster, but it's not like so ridiculous that it feels like it's like, you know, Looney Tunes style or something like that. The other thing too is this is one of those few games where I wish that like she just was always an auto run. Yeah, I feel like I don't mind holding a button down for her to walk once in a blue moon for like, okay, I need to walk, like almost like Tomb Raider style, like use the walking if you need to just precision like an area. But for the most part, I just kind of, I've always felt like it'd be nice if I didn't have to hold down circle this whole time or whatever that, or square, whatever one you have to hold.
So that might be something different then. On PS2 and anyway, PS1 for that matter, So I was able to play with analog control the whole time, and analog has to where if you barely move your stick, you're walking. If you full press it, you're running. So you never have to hold a button at all.
You know, it sounds weird. I don't think I ever touched the analog stick. I think.
Really?
Because well, it was one of those ones. I'm like, I think I literally just used the D. Well, no, I take that back. I thought I was using analog.
But you're emulating though, so I'm curious if that has any.
Well,
kind of
because you can go into RetroArch and you can change the controller between a regular PlayStation or a DualShock. It should be on DualShock, but sometimes it's amazing how much those things will. Well, then again, I'm trying to think. I know that like I would never probably. I'd definitely be using the D-pad during all like the fighting parts because.
No, I mean, in my opinion, the analog worked great for everything.
Yeah, I bet you I was using the D-pad the whole time. I bet you. You know, that might have been it. Well, yeah, I don't know, huh? I'm almost curious.
I noticed it because, like, if you disable the analog on the controller itself, you know, physically hit that button, then it converts everything over to the D-pad and whatnot. And you're right. Like, if you're just pressing the D-pad in any one direction without holding circle at all, like your walking speed. If you're holding circle, then your sprint speed. If you turn analog on entirely, like I said, it's pressure sensitive depending on directional. So
that's kind of cool then.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because this game probably would have come out right when the DualShock came out, so they would have felt like, oh, we gotta put that feature in there, maybe.
Well, and that's what I was wondering is like, did I have, you know, is my physical copy like a director's cut or something? No, it's just the regular game. I don't even know if this game even has a director's cut or anything.
No, I think it just has the one. It's not like Resident Evil 2, because Resident Evil 2 came out like in a sense at the beginning of the year, and then like they released the DualShock version like the next year or whatever.
Yeah,
you know. Just because it was just happened to be time with that controller issue, you know. But interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I guess as I said, I was using it on an emulator. So, but I love how I've been playing this game for the last week and a half. I can't remember if I used it with the D-pad. I put like technically it says I put like 40 hours into it, but that was just because of speed up.
Seriously.
Interesting. Well, because that was one thing is I felt like this game was kind of unnecessary to hold the circle thing. I mean, I was like, there's no option in there to turn it off or anything. You know, I bet you that was it then.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So
pretty much that boss. You get to the point where you've died at multiple times, and all you really had to do was flip this switch on the ship, and Aya activates pretty much the self-destruct, or like she overloads the power. Books it out of there and blows the whole thing up, diving off the ship. Explosion happens, kills this thing, takes out the ultimate being and whatnot like that. She swims ashore, whatever. Daniel picks her up. Maida's there, you know, and the rest of the police crew that's still alive. Actually, we forgot to mention that part. There's the whole scene where the police station gets taken over and it kills a bunch of the police officers, and you have to fight your way up to the top. Maybe that's the one where the Harrier crashes, the top of the police station.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is.
Maybe that's where that's at. Because we totally spaced out on that scene. I was kind of surprised because I actually think that's one of the coolest parts is that you go back to your police station, which always seemed like the safe place. And no. No, it's actually a pretty good place to train, but...
yeah.
And then there's the dog, which I thought was just kind of ironic because it's a police dog, and like the little kid comes in and like, oh, you come play with the police dog, and he loves kids. It's like when like in real life, like nobody pets police dogs. Like that's part of the protocol. That's not how they work. Yeah. You wouldn't just send a little kid in there.
Yeah. Well, I think like just to touch briefly, I think in general boss fights in this game are really cool designs, really cool mechanics to them and whatnot. I wouldn't say any of them are like bone-breakingly hard or anything. Like, you know, like they're quirky, and I think that another piece of this type of genre of game that can add to frustration that you'll never be able to gauge is just its RNG nature in general. You know, there's a lot of I don't know. There's a lot of RNG involved with, you know, like if you kill this mob or if you open this container or whatever, are you going to get the health item that you need, or are you just going to get a piece of junk? Or are you going to get the thing, you know? And like, and I think like even in the you and I just talking about our play experiences alone, you know, like just between two individuals. I mean, like imagine like taking a pool of 10,000 people and seeing how properly different everything went for them and their thoughts on the games too, you know? So this game's extremely subjective, just depending on what happens during your play. But I think in general, like boss fights, combat in general, exploration, like literally everything about it is just like, it's phenomenal. It's so good.
Yeah, no, there's so much cool stuff there. I mean, even speaking of boss fights, 'cause I was just thinking about, because that police station, we didn't talk about that one too much, but the dog Shiva turns into like a three-headed Cerberus type thing at the top. The police commissioner like almost like tries to put it, he like takes a bullet for the kid and whatnot, or takes a the attack from the dog for a kid. And you go up there and fight it. And I almost want to say that might be the first boss battle that says like, hey, there's multiple objects you can kind of battle here. And so it gives you a little bit of that kind of like style where it's like, okay, I have 3 different heads and each one does a different ability and so on. There's not tons of enemies that do that. There's probably, maybe it feels like 5 or 6 enemies in the entire game that have multiple parts you can attack. But it's kind of a neat little feature here and there.
Yeah, totally. Yep.
And then this is the part that's kind of funny. He's like, okay, so you defeat the creature, you come on out at the very end, you're there with Daniel, you're there with Maida and everything like that. You're like, oh, good, we took care of this and whatnot. And it feels like it's like, yeah, next week, let's go see that opera again. It's like, I'm pretty sure nobody would be going to see the for a good while.
Yeah, exactly.
The fact that like last time this happened, like literally a week and a half ago on Christmas Eve, everybody burned up and died here except for one police officer, strangely enough. And hey, here's the thing, she's going again. Who else wants to go sit her?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's the monkey stuff.
And then it kind of has kind of a weird, mysterious ending because like they go there and they're watching literally the same play again, new actress this time, and they're going through it and whatnot. And there's a part where like somebody lights like a torch up, and all the police officers stand up and like, whoa, calm down. It's okay.
Yeah.
But then it has this kind of an ominous ending too, where like Aya's standing there, whatnot, and then she sees everybody's eyes start to light up, or not everybody, but half the crowd's eyes start lighting up and so on like that. And it's that weird one. It's like, is the mitochondria and Aya now reacting kind of like the way that Eve did? What's kind of going on here and so on like that. Doesn't matter. Cut the credits. That's where you're left thinking.
No, and I like cannot wait to because like I said, I've played through PE2 in the past. It's been a very, very long time since I have. So like now having this type of game under my belt, like now being able to walk into PE2 and have just that much more context, like I'm so curious. I know that they're wildly different games in terms of how they play and whatnot, but how they're going to continue on this story and whatnot, and like how everything mixes. I'm so curious to see how mumuch callbacks there's going to be in PE2 to PE1 and all that too. So yeah, it should be super cool.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to it because I said that last time I went to try Parasite Eve 2, I got maybe anywhere from a third to maybe halfway through the game, and that was as far as it was getting and everything like that. And then I remember I rebought it again, I think on PS3 or something like that. And I was like, I'll play this again. I just never got back around to it. So it's like now that it's kind of fresh in our minds with the first one, it'll be fun to jump into that pretty darn soon.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to touch on too is just some of the Chrysler building stuff, because this is one of those things I remember back in the day, when I initially beat the game and then played it a second time and then got to the Chrysler building and it's like, okay, cool. And I got about maybe 35 floors up there, like not so bad. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is going to get real tough real soon. And I'm either going to have to do a lot of training or whatnot to get past there. So it's going to be a hard one. And I just never came back to it. It's like, oh, that's one of those ones. And I will say this, the Chrysler building, I don't think I would even attempt this, especially nowadays, without doing it on emulation. I feel like you would be just, you would just be, torturing yourself. It's kind of like doing the Final Fantasy VII Battle Arena, like trying to do it old school on PlayStation 1. It's almost kind of stupid now. Now, back in the day, I did do it. I sat down here and played for 9 hours straight, and I couldn't save once during that whole time period, and hoping that the power would stay on or something went free. Because I remember nowadays, it's like when they made like the the upgraded Final Fantasy VII version, and it's like you can pretty much go in there and you could just blast through that battle arena, just like turn up all like the features and just clear it out. It's like, this is so nice. I'm like, I remember you'd have to make a day out of it back in the day. Like you'd get like your buddies over and whatnot, and be like, what are we doing there? We're gonna do battle arena over and over and over again. And I literally think that's what the Chrysler's like. The Chrysler's got a little bit more leeway because you can always still kind of exit back out and save. Like every floor you go up, they give you a key card so you can go back down. You can go back to the police station, drop your stuff off, do any of that stuff and come back. If you need to, you can go collect more potions or something like that.
Gotcha.
But even still, it's just because of how, in a sense, kind of slow it does, and since the building's randomly generated and so on like that, and you have to go through there. I mean, my file crept up to 37 hours to finish the Chrysler one. Now, granted, that's with the speed up thing on. And when I got to the Chrysler building, I kid you not, I turned the speed to like, I was like, you can go to ×5 because some of that, because I'm just going through the building like, dude, there's one room in there you want to find that has like the good items in it. And then once you find that room, then you find the exit and then you go up to the next one and you repeat that process 77 times almost. Well, technically the last 7 floors are just, a scene almost, but 70 times you do that. And you go through and you fight different enemies that you've seen throughout the game. But then you also start to come across enemies that it's kind of weird. There's actually brand new enemies they throw in there. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Like you did it. It's like you felt like you could have like interwoven these somewhere else in the game. It's like, oh, there's some different ones up here and so on, some different variations. And then there's even some bosses too. It's like you fight a lot of the same ones over again that you kind of fought, and they're just a little bit harder versions.
Yeah.
But then I got to like the top, or I'm not the top, close to the top. There's this boss that's like on the 70th floor, I guess, and it's this bee thing. Dude, this was the hardest boss in the game. It literally had all these like cheap ass attacks that like would come at you, and it was a bee, and then like little bees would come on by and they would try to attack you. Then they'd try to go heal the queen bee, and then a big old fat bee would come out at some point and start throwing spikes at you. And I kind of realized that with the flooring, you go, okay, if I stand on this side here, the second that it does attack, I run the other side and so on. But then there was these other things getting in the way. And then once you finally just thought you got a hold of this bag, you're like, okay, I'm doing pretty good. I'm dodging these attacks and everything like that. It literally just has a ability where it's just like, it freezes Aya and just like, here you go. 800 damage.
Oh my god.
You literally can't even dodge it. It's just like, you take that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, dude, it did that like multiple times. Like, it was, I was like, dude, am I going to be able to get past this? Like, this is tough. And
no, that's brutal.
I finally, and I remember the time I finally beat it, I ran up to the corner and I just stood up there. It's like, I would get hit by some stuff, but like the bee kind of floated back and forth. So I'd miss out on a lot of the other ones. So it's like, I would take some damage, but I would just stand there just wailing on it. And it's like, we're going for it. Let's just see what happens. And then I finally beat that, regrouped and everything, and went to the top. And when you get to the top, there's a super special boss battle there that actually kind of adds to the ending, which is kind of cool. So it does make it a little bit worthwhile. It doesn't give you any extra cutscenes or anything like that, but it gives you a lot more dialogue. And you get to the top, and Maya's up there at the top, standing there, and you have this long talking scene with her, and it's like, oh, here's your sister, and she's like, what happened to the family, after the accident, where'd everybody go? Where's Aya? Where's all this stuff? She's like, I'm Aya, like, you know what I mean? But like, obviously she's 20 years older, at this point, and so on. And then you fight what it's called, the true form, I think, of Eve or whatnot. And I think what it's supposed to be is, because it looks like you're literally battling what Aya turns into in the Liberation. So you're battling her. So I think it's supposed to be, it's almost like a spread off of Aya's mitochondria. In a sense, it's like the Dark Link battle from Zelda is the best way I can kind of describe it. Is Aya's pretty much fighting off the evil, I guess, if she had any in her, at the top of the Chrysler building and so on. And that boss battle was pretty tricky too. Not as bad as the bee one, but it still took you. There had to be some kind of practice going on of how to manage it and so on. And probably I'll say this, if I had probably a little bit better items at that point, I was kind of like milked out of my items. And it was, after a while, it's like one of those ones like, well, where do you go to go find? You can't really find revives. So that's one of the other things I will say in this game. There's no stores or anything, because it's an RPG. You would think there'd be some kind of you think that junk would be like your currency or something like that.
Oh yeah.
But there's none of that in the game. So like when it comes down to certain stuff, it's just like, hopefully you find it. Maybe somebody randomly drops it. So I was literally living off of a lot of potion 2s, which at this point in the game don't do a whole lot. When your health's like 900 and the potion 2 does 90.
Getting like 90.
Yeah, so I had to use a lot of that, but I kind of worked my way through, kind of built up a strategy and everything like that, and beat it. And then it has kind of a neat ending where you kill that true form Eve or whatever, and then Maya reappears, and then Aya's like, okay, it's time to go home now, finally. And she takes her, and they walk on off. And then the credits roll, and the credits are just slightly different, because now they show just like still shots of the cutscenes in the background. But I thought it was pretty cool, because it's one of those things that's like, when we were playing it through, I'm like, this is just one of those ones that I don't mind putting the time into. Of course, I'm using the speed ups to make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
As I said, like if you were to do this in like 98, 99,
no.
I hate to sort of say it, this game would end up being like a 45-hour game, and it would be like, but it's not that long of a game, so it's just a really extended
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's like taking Dino Crisis 2 and saying like, okay, you know how that game plays? Now, what if it was like 35 hours extras,
Yeah.
but it's the same game?
Yeah, really what it sounds like to me, I'd actually be curious to go check it out myself. But really what it sounds like to me is, so one of my favorite games of all time is Bloodborne, and Bloodborne has this thing called Chalice Dungeons. And Chalice Dungeons are more or less, it's just extra content. It's, you want more Bloodborne, here's more Bloodborne, you know, and like it's randomly generated dungeon. It's, you know, like has a totality final boss that totally ties back into the main plot and all that, you know. Yeah, super interesting to see that early on, or at least, you know, develop that long ago. You know, that's super cool. Yeah, it's probably superficial, you know, in terms of like padding of length and whatnot. But I'd imagine at that time, you know, if you buy a $50 or $60 game or however much this game was at launch or whatever, you know, that's probably the one game you're going to get for the year. You know, it's probably that's probably on your birthday. It's probably on Christmas, you know, or whatever. At least as a kid, you know?
Yeah.
And, so yeah.
No, and that does make sense, because that's whenever I see games nowadays and they do that thing where they have something really extended in there like that, be like, yo, I got other games to play. Like, I hate to sort of say it, you aren't the only one, you know, and that's kind of how it is. And it reminds me like that thing that, because it's a Squaresoft game, I bet you they had this weird feeling. I mean, like, God, guys, is Parasite Eve going to be too short for our audience? You know what I mean? Like, are they going to be kind of mad that it takes them 11 hours to play through it the first time or so, 10 hours, you know? Which, you know, roughly it's the same length as Resident Evil or anything else like that. But I could see for them, it's like, well, you know, Final Fantasy VII was probably an average of 30 to 40 hours for someone's first playthrough. So, you know, Chrono Trigger's 25 hours or something like that. Like, we probably want to, you know, kind of padded a little bit. I feel like that's why they threw that in there, and they're like, we'll give them a bunch of stuff to do. They'll have unlockable stuff, and then plus you have the EX game, which does kind of add for a lot of replayability, because that's like the important thing I think in a lot of these survival horror games, is being able to have that. And I kid you not, this is probably one of the best new game pluses there is, because one, you got to make sure when Wayne comes by and tells you at the end of the game, make sure you name those guns. If you don't name them, you don't keep them.
Oh, really?
I learned that because I accidentally skipped the armor one accidentally, and I didn't keep my armor. And I was like, is that what happens? What the hell? So I lost my armor the first time around.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then when you go back in there, so it's like you get your two guns that you name, and then you get your gun and you get your armor, and then you restart. And then the game's actually quite hard, though, because I remember like when it started off, like I had that rocket launcher I was using, and it had like the freeze perk on it, and it was like, dude, this was doing great.
Yeah.
The freeze perk and the EX thing was like terrible, because most of all the enemies absorbed it, so they was doing like 5 damage to like half the enemies, and it was like I literally had to toss that gun and get something else and be like. Yeah. And I got kind of scared of perks ever since then. I'm like, well, I'm not going to put it on I'm not putting the flame one on or any of this stuff.
Right.
When I got the cyanide one, I literally looked up online first. I'm like, is this thing will this work on enemies? Or am I going to be, because I didn't want to mess with it, because I was like, I had a problem before, and it's like, you know, until you get those unlimited tools and super tools, which you don't really get till the tail end, you want to be a little bit careful about modifying that, because then you could kind of take a good gun and screw it over.
A good weapon. Yeah, totally.
So I looked up the cyanide, and it was like, yeah, they're like, some characters might not like take to the cyanide, but it just does normal damage. I'm like, fine, that's all I need to hear.
Perfect.
You know, so but that's the one thing, is there's some interesting things there, because I had a way harder time, even though I had the upgraded guns and I had the extra battle points and all that stuff. Your level starts over again. But everything else, you know, you get battle points, all that stuff carries over. But I actually had a way harder time going through that EX round 2 than I did with the first round.
Really? Interesting.
So it is kind of, because just the enemies just had a lot more different defenses and so on like that made it a little bit more of a struggle. Now my guns are so ridiculous that I don't know if I'll have a problem from this point on. The other thing I want to say is actually kind of weird is I beat the Chrysler Tower at like level 36 or 7. I think so. I went back. I went back to level up just for a bit, mainly just to collect potions. And this is the weird thing, is when I got the level 38, and you know the battle points kept going, and then all of a sudden I think I got to either 38 or 39, and I noticed my experience was like, it's like your next level is like 2,000, and I was like, what? Really? And it's like it's almost like it restarted back to like 1, but I was level 38 or 9. and I was getting like the experience points again. Like, so I'd level up literally in the museum, like every battle for like the next, like, so I got to like level 47.
Yep.
But I was getting lower B points and so on. It was kind of weird. It's like the game didn't want you to keep going higher, but it will give you the levels, but it didn't really want you to go any farther than about 35, 36.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended my run roughly 9.5-ish hours. I think it was like 9 hours, 20 minutes, however long it was. Yeah, like I was level 36, I think, when I finished. And then doing some like post game research and watching some videos and whatnot, I heard somebody talking about that exact thing that you're talking about. Once you break a certain barrier, everything kind of resets. And leveling from, I forgot what level it caps at or whatever. Let's call it 39, or whatever, like you just said. But once you break that barrier or whatever, that run from that point all the way to 99 apparently is like pretty. I mean, it takes a while, it's timely to do, but it's not hard, like you're not sitting there just like grinding and grinding and grinding, for like 800,000 XP, 1 million XP, 12, like all the way up, so yeah, from what I understand, like getting to 99 is actually not that bad once you break that barrier. So,
well, it makes you wonder too if you were going to go that distance, does it reset again? Say at another 36 levels or something like that. So probably about 70 something. It resets again, if I had to guess. So it makes it easier probably to do that, because I'll say those last couple levels, like from like 34 to like 37 or whatever, those ones, they took a little bit their sweet time to get those last ones. But then it was all of a sudden, it was like I was literally another 10 levels and probably like, I kid you not, like, well, sped up, but like 15 more minutes. Just running through the museum and so on like that. One thing I did notice too, though, is once I hit that whatever, actually I think I wrote it down here. I actually see it. 38 at level 38 is when it reset.
Okay.
But this is the other thing I noticed is your stats don't increase anymore past that point though. So that's
really
done. The only thing you get at past level 38 was I just got more BP points. That was it. Nothing else. Yeah. So the only thing,
sense. I mean,
so at least the one thing you can do is get more BP points. I literally already had my items maxed out and my time bar maxed out at 9. They max out at 99. So it'd be interesting to go through the game one more time. Well, I guess every time you play over again, though, you'd get all those BP points again.
Yeah.
So you could pretty much stack that, and I bet you could get your gun to 99 or 999.
Yeah.
I don't know what you'd be doing with it at that point.
You can. So that was one of the videos I saw post launch was the level 99 guy, using his level 99 whatever the fuck, his weapons or whatever. But every single shot of this SMG, and he was full autoing, like every single shot was doing 999 damage. He's just and it's just you just see these numbers just stacking super fast and so like, yeah, dude, it's nuts. It's like,
and that's probably where that machine gun comes in kind of handy by that point, is when it does that much damage, because the machine gun has a perk where it shoots randomly, which when you first get it, it's like, well, this is stupid, I don't want it to shoot randomly, I want to make my own decisions here. But when it does that much damage, just blast everything in your path. Well, it's like my shotgun, because that's as long as the enemies are all in front, it hits everything. The shotgun AK-47 that I have. It's an AK-47 that fires shotgun bullets for some reason.
Hell yeah.
But there's some really fun stuff with there. As I said, it's kind of a bummer though that they didn't take the same gameplay style and just make a second one of it, because it'd be so interesting to see what you did when you expanded on it, added more things to it and so on. And even with the third birthday, it's kind of like one of those ones, like I felt like that would have been a good place you could have brought back this style game, and like you're on the PSP, no one's gonna notice kind of thing. You know what I mean? You don't have to make a modern game in a sense. You could make a classic style game that just happens to have some modern graphics. And as I said, the PSP one, I know it gets flack and whatnot, and I love the game. I literally bought it day one, and I played it through about twice back in the day. One of these days we should sit down and play that one too. I think it's worth it. You know what I mean? As long as you like Parasite Eve, it's cool. As I said, it's not as good as the first two. You just know that going in, but it's not. I still think it's pretty fun, especially for a PSP game. You know what I mean? Like, the bar is a little bit lower when you're playing a handheld game, especially back in the day.
And I think that this can, in this conversation, I continually bring up, episode after episode of like remake or reimagining potential. I think this game totally has that, but how to do it, I almost think you need to go 1-to-1, like update graphics and colors and shadow and lighting and character models and all the stuff. Update everything like that, but keep it pretty much the same. Like, use the same game logic. Use the same, like, kind of like how like Oblivion Remastered just came out. That is Oblivion outright, 2006 Oblivion, 100%. But they vomited Unreal Engine 5 all over it, and it looks great, and it plays great, and it it's totally fine. I think that it'd be hard to do with a PS1 game, to do that. They would have to do some kind of development, I suppose. But but more or less exactly that. Just one-to-one the game, but just like update everything. Like, I think that would be a cult hit again, bring a lot more people into the fold and fray, because I don't think there's really any easy way to really play this game outside of physical media, your option with the emulation and whatnot, because I don't think does this exist on PC?
No, I don't think so. I think it's one of those games that they put it on that want list for GOG, and I think it said, it's like, well, this is like kind of an exclusive, I think, to maybe it is, because I will say Final Fantasy 7 and 8 are on PC, so it's not out of the question. This game was on PS3's Virtual Console and PSP Vita and PSP. So there was a period where it was kind of easy to pick up. I think it was like $5.99 or something like that.
Yeah.
If PlayStation ever really brings back their Virtual Console, because it's there, but it's kind of like they have like Virtual Console Lite. It's like it's never been nearly as good as it was like on PS3. That would be kind of cool. But I'm gonna say this. Here's my two games that came out somewhat recently that I feel like would be a good way for Parasite Eve to kind of come back. Is one, there's those Tomb Raider remasters of 1 through 6, where it's literally Tomb Raider. The gameplay has not changed one bit, but it has a complete facelift of graphics. And if you don't like that, you press select and boom, or start, whatever it is. Boom, there's the old graphics. Switch back and forth as much as you want. But it's the exact same game. They throw in a couple other little bonus things like, hey, if you don't like the tank controls, here's this. Good luck. It doesn't play very good like that, but there you go for all the people that complain. You could do something like that with Parasite Eve and just make it load faster. Because all the things it really needs is if it loaded just a little bit faster. I would say if you could have it just where you could speed it up just a fraction more. But not too ridiculous where it's 3 times. 3 times is too much. Just a little bit more. Then the other way I would say is that this is a Square game too. I told you about this, was that Trials of Mana remake that they did. And that one was, because it's a weird one, because it's a Super Nintendo game, but they remade it in full 3D, but it pretty much keeps like the whole 100% same line of game. I mean, of course, the gameplay's different because now it's in 3D comparatively to 2D. But the story and everything like that, they didn't do something like Final Fantasy 7 remake where they're like, we're going to change it around and make it something it's not. No. They just followed the exact path and said, here it is. It just happens to be in 3D now. And other than that, though, everything else is pretty much the same. That would be kind of cool. It's just like, okay, so it's in like a 3D engine, but it still plays exactly the same.
Yeah, I think that's literally all this game would need, like at least to introduce into new audiences. Because I'm looking at a couple pages here, and it very much seems like it was on PlayStation 1, like just outright. I don't think it launched on anything else. It does reference the PS3 VM, Virtual Console.
Because I know it's on there because I literally have, I want to say, both Parasite Eve 1 and 2 on PS3/Vita or whatever. But because that was a nice time period where I was like, God, I can catch up on all these games that are kind of expensive and they're only $5.99. It's kind of a bummer that this game kind of fell the wayside. But since it's not out of the question for Square to do this stuff. I mean, they've done it the 7, 8, and 9. You know what I mean? My only fear is if they went too far and did like a super remake of it, but then they changed it, kind of like, I hate to start saying it, like the Final Fantasy 7 remake. Like that's the problem with that one. Is like, it's not a bad game, but it's like every time I kind of put it on, especially with that second part, you just go like, you know what? I own a really good version of this game, and it's not this one. It's the 97 version. Why am I even playing this new one? Because it's comparatively like not good at all compared to the 97 one. It's like it's lost all. It looks great. It's pretty looking and all that kind of stuff. The graphics are neat, but boy, it lost all the charm in the process somehow, some way. And the gameplay just is very like basic and not strategy oriented anymore. And that'd be my only fear, is that if they did that, if they did the Trials of Manon thing, would be fine.
I 100% agree with you there, because I've even thought about it. I'm like, how would like a Bloober Team with Silent Hill 2 remake, like how would that style of remastering, remaking, reimagining, whatever, you know, like whatever you want to call it, how would that work here? And I started thinking about like, well, they could, I guess, go over the shoulder shooter. I guess they could do this, that, and the other, add more into the horror theme, but then you're diminishing the JRPG side of things. You know, like, is there a proper way to do that in an over the shoulder shooter? No. Like, after so much thought and consideration about that, the game design would have to change entirely. You could have the same characters, you could have the same plot, you could have the same monster designs, you could have all that stuff. Like, all that stuff could exist. But to have a real-time combat system with turn-based mechanics melded in, you've got these crazy JRPG elements associated with like a very well-written story, very good progression, very good. I mean, like, literally the only things I'm going to complain about, 3 things in this game: time management with certain things, very a lot of it boils down to time management. It's one hit kill encounters. It's
save points.
Save points is bad. And what was the other one? It's
load times.
Load times are definitely part of that. But basically anything that wastes your time is like the worst parts of these games. This game for me. Outside of that, easy, very high rating in my eyes. You know, I think that anybody that enjoys JRPGs, if you like survival horror, if you like, you know, Square in general from this era, this is a no-brainer. This is a pick up and play, 100%.
Yeah, like I personally, like as I said, I'm just playing it over this last couple weeks or whatever, that I sunk some more time into it. I literally kind of think about it, I'm like, yeah, this might be one of my favorite games of all time. Like, really? I think it's one of the pinnacles of PlayStation, and I do think PlayStation is one kind of the strangely enough, one of the best eras. It's weird. If you would have asked me that when I was a kid, I would have been, because PlayStation to me when I was a kid was like, yeah, it's okay. It's not a Sega Saturn or an N64. Yeah. But as time has gone on, it's like I've become way more fond of the PlayStation and so on. Yeah. I think it's literally up there with like Resident Evil 1 and everything like that, and Silent Hill, and it's like it holds that place so well that's like, God, you just go back to it so much. Or like I'll say it's like that Dino Crisis, where it's like I can go back to Dino Crisis 2 so much because it's so much fun to play. It's got tons of replayability. That's almost how Parasite Eve is. Yeah. As I said, the only thing it really kind of needs is, I'll say it's like that. And granted, when you play it on the emulator, it kind of bypasses that time management issue of like the little bit slow gameplay / load times / save issues. They're all taken care of because you played it on the emulator, you know, in a sense. And as I said, actually, realistically, if they just did something like that Tomb Raider, the Tomb Raider I think is actually the best like example of like the remaster that they could do, where it keeps the same game intact, gives you a little bit of extra bells and whistles in the options, and then it's a facelift on the graphics. And if you don't like that, you can press select and boom, you're right back to it. Or the other way, I'll say, this is another weird one, is if you did it like Resident Evil Remake, the original, where on GameCube it's the exact same Resident Evil game in a sense, but they've remade it, but they still kept the tank controls. They still kept, you know, the kind of different pre-rendered backgrounds and so on like that. I think if you did that, where like you just re-rendered everything in a sense and re-put the graphics together and so on, but it still had the same gameplay style, that would be fine too. Yeah.
And I think literally that's all they need to do. What you were just, I don't know what triggered this in my head. This game would be perfect on, or even like I said, like a spiritual successor or something, on a handheld. Like I'm thinking about like our Switch 2, or you know, like my Steam Deck or something, like a handheld, like portable type thing. Even on a touchscreen, I think that this game could totally work on a touchscreen.
Yeah, like what? Because
there's nothing stupid.
You know, for the fact that Square's once again they've released, you know, 15, 20 plus different RPGs throughout the years of everything from all the Dragon Quest to all the Final Fantasies for the most part, to even things like Chrono Trigger and Legend of Mana and all that kind of stuff. they've done it to a lot of their other games. I don't know why Parasite Eve has kind of got shot. I mean, even Chrono Cross came out just recently.
Do you think it possibly might be because of copyright of some form?
Because of that book, maybe?
Because of the book or the movie or something, you know, like, I mean, it totally could just be that simple, you know?
Yeah, because that could be one of those weird, because, you know, it is tied to that book. It is tied there. That might be the reason why they haven't done one since the third birthday. Yeah. Because I'll say it's the other thing that would be kind of a cool, and I'm just going to use Tomb Raider again because it just seems like the logical one, is you throw Parasite Eve 1 and 2 together as a double pack.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's easy.
Easy double pack. You make it like the Tomb Raider collection or whatnot. You know, I mean, gosh, they just did that with Lunar. I mean, there's that's not Square, but Lunar 1 and 2 was thrown together in a nice double pack, you know, where it plays on the new systems. It looks fresh and everything. And if you don't like that, that's okay. You can pop in the PSX version and there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential. I'm kind of sad that it is so limited to like I said, I mean, like, yes, you can emulate it for sure. You know, it's a little depressing that it's limited to just PlayStation. Like, I'm sure this game, like, it would have been probably 4 or 5 cartridges or something. But, you know, like, if it could have been converted over to something like 64, you know, or any other console of that era, like, I mean, maybe might have seen more mainline success. Maybe might have seen more, you know, like, we might have Parasite Eve 6 by this point, you know, like, you know, if something like that happened. But at the same time, it's very novel. It's very just so unique. I don't think that there really isn't. I can't name one other game that really comes close to this outside of what you were mentioning earlier, because I've heard similar in videos that I've been watching about PE. Vagrant Story. And Vagrant Story is another one that I would love to get my hands on, but it's another one of those eBay $120, $130 minimum, you know, like, so I now knowing that, like, I'm definitely going to keep my eyes out more on Vagrant Story. And, like, I don't know if it'll work for, you know, this podcast in particular. I don't know what Vagrant Story even is, but you know, if it's something that we're interested in playing on Old Man Orange in general in the future, fuck yeah, you know, like,
I would love to. It was like one of those games that I've always wanted to play, but when I heard that it played like Parasite Eve, I got really excited, you know, and the fact that it also, like, it has the Final Fantasy Tactics guy putting it together, so it has that kind of look and feel, and I love tactics. That also is another selling point to me too. So the combo of those two things together, I think it's definitely one of those ones that I would be 100% down for giving that one a go. And it probably, if it's like Parasite Eve, it's probably a nice length game too. You're probably not gonna, especially if you play it on an emulator, you'll probably be able to play it in less than 20 hours, which is always kind of cool. But yeah, and I just want to go back to one point you said when you mentioned the N64 stuff, because I think about this a lot, especially over the years, is that, like, when you think about the core thing of a lot of these games that come out on PlayStation and why they're on PlayStation, why they have multiple discs and so on like that, it really sums up only because of two things, just the cutscenes and the audio. You know, if you just MIDI the audio out and then you take the cutscenes and either you minus them down, which I know, like, back in the day that was kind of a tough sell if you did that. They did that in some N64 games, like Shadows of the Empire. They just did still cutscenes of that one, and then it had dialogue roll below it, which I thought that's what it always was. And I played the PC version, like, way later in life. I'm like, they have full-on CG cutscenes in this one, and they look really good. Yeah, I was like, what is this? But like, nowadays, I think it'd be kind of cool is that, because you probably could take all these games, like all these RPGs, and actually, if you just took out the cutscenes, and even if you did the thing where you just put still images up and, like, whatever, like, I know people would bitch about that, but you know what I mean? Just the whole point is just, like, get the gameplay onto the N64 card. I think it's totally possible, and probably would actually, polygon wise, would probably actually run even better. You know, maybe. It's just the 64 just loses out on the CD bonuses. That's kind of it, which is the audio and having the cutscenes. But if you minus out the audio and the cutscenes, the games themselves are only, like, you know, sometimes 100 megabytes, and you can compress that down even farther. Right.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see, you know, but yeah, I mean, like, you know, I think, like you said, even just a simple up-res and, you know, re-release of this just launch it on Switch too, I think it would put it in so many people's hands, like it would be neat, but it's all a Far Cry, who knows what's actually going to happen. But
as I said, it feels like it's not too impossible because Square, at least they put stuff out all the time, and they put out Chrono Cross, and that was kind of was a random one to throw out, and they did sort of one of those somewhat remasters, I guess you would almost say, of it just a couple of years ago. Ironically, they didn't put Chrono Trigger on anything but handhelds. I thought that's always kind of strange.
Yeah.
It's like the weirdest one. It's like, why is that not on? Like, you think that would at least, if anything, be on like the Nintendo, like Super Nintendo virtual console part.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just as like a, hey, here you go. But that's okay. So, I mean, I feel like there's a chance, but, and plus, seems like survival horror is getting a little bit more popular just in recent times. I think with the Resident Evil remakes, I think that's kind of what put the almost like rolling back of the snowball, and everybody else starts to throw out their new versions, and Silent Hill's coming out left and right with new ones, and Glow in the Dark and all. So I think it is kind of having a little bit of a resurgence in that kind of genre. So here's hoping, but yeah, beyond that though, I think the best thing to do is pretty much to pick it up on an emulation. If you can handle that and figure that out. If you can't figure that out, go to AliExpress. Some nice Chinese person will have a system set up for you that you can easily turn on.
Easy peasy. Heck yeah.
But other than that though, it's like I cannot say too much good stuff about this game. I think it's one of those ones. It's so unique. It's unlike anything else out there that you generally play. And the story, the characters, I think Aya Brea is one of the coolest ones. There's just so much I love about it, and it's worth checking out the movie too. I'm not gonna say it's like the greatest movie, but it adds context to the game just a little bit more. Even I wouldn't even mind checking out the book at some point. But we'll definitely have to come back a few episodes from now and do some Parasite Eve 2. I'm definitely really excited about that, for the fact that I've never been able to get more than whatever percentage I got through that. So, do that. But beyond all that fun stuff, you can always check out more Old Man Orange and Silent Evil podcasts on YouTube and Spotify. Till then, I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
I am Cameron.
And we'll see you some other time.